Boo-ba-doo-ba-doo. Yeah, so there is no Slido. Man, as I'm looking at the video, I'm realizing I should have shaved. Oh wow.
Yeah, so the resolution on your video is probably much higher than we can see.
Yeah, I should lower it. You see a rectangle. Also, as the hair starts to turn gray, it becomes more noticeable. I'm not happy about that. All right. Let's see. So everyone, just as a reminder, leave yourself muted unless you are the one talking. I will post all your questions to the YouTube live chat fancy link I sent you. And I will call on you when those questions come up. Prefix your questions with MM for me. That's how I know it's you versus someone else with your exact same name. Also, don't use any apps. Everyone except Nis should be prepared, or everyone except whoever the mentor is at the time should be prepared. Sometimes I'll send like private messages in the group chat within the Hangout. So be on alert for that. Nis, ignore it. And that's about it. All right, Nis, you're feeling good? We're all good?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so you should leave yourself muted too. And we're about to get going. Man, my hair. Thank God I've got a haircut. Jeez. So just bad hair all around today. All right, folks. We're going to get going in just 1 second. It's Sunday, April 15th, 2018, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today, we're joined by one of our mentors, Nis Frome. He's going to be leading a talk on how to tell your product management story and build your personal brand. So those of you who might be joining us for the first time today, let me just briefly explain the format. People you see along the bottom of your screen here are mentors and mentees in the current session of the Product Mentor Program. Product Mentor Program works to pair up people, product management gurus and people at various stages in their product management career up for a period of about 6 months. What we work to do is help make better product people, better product decisions, and once in a while, better products along the way. We'll go around with some introductions in just a moment. And also remember, you can post your questions directly to the YouTube chat. If you're joining us on YouTube, or if you go to theproductmentor.com/live, you can post your questions there along the bottom of the screen. It's below the video. And then I'll pass your questions along fairly real time. But with that said, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how this all works in just a moment, let me just kind of go around the room. Quick introductions. We'll say, as you introduce yourself, who are you? Are you a mentor or mentee? Where are you? Anything else you want to add about yourself? And we'll just quickly go around the room. I'll start with Nis, the person closest to me.
Hey, I'm Nis Frome. I work at Alpha. I'm a mentor for this session for Nick, and I'm normally located in New York City, but right now I'm in Houston, Texas.
Awesome. And let's go to Esley.
Hey, I'm Esley, and I am a mentee mentored by Andrew, and I am a product manager at MBO Partners here in Washington, D.C.
Outstanding. And now to Dominic.
Oh, this is actually Steven. I'm Steven. I'm a product manager in New York, and I'm a mentee for Kyle, and I'm signed into the wrong account.
That's going to be a little tricky for me today. I will now use a Post-it note on my monitor. And now let's go over to Anthony.
Hey guys, I'm Anthony Lazarus. I am a product manager at a company called Sit On It Seating. We make office furniture. I am a mentee, and I live in Los Angeles.
Outstanding. And over to Andrew.
I'm Andrew Hsu. I'm a product manager in New York, and I work at a company called Vega Factor, where we help companies build better habits and drive organizational change. I'm a mentor for Esley in my second time. It's been great.
Awesome. And over to Alberto.
Hey guys, I'm Alberto Simon. I'm based out of New York, and I currently work at a startup named Payability, and then recently another one called Masterworks, and I'm a mentor.
All right, someone's a little bit busy. Cool. So everyone who's joining us, and I am Jeremy Horn, aka the Product Guy, and I'll be the moderator here today. As questions come in, as I mentioned, through the productmentor.com/live or through our YouTube live chat as well on youtube.com. Basically, as the questions come in, I'll pass them along to our mentor as he's talking. I'll jump in at various good jump-in points, and we'll answer your questions in fairly real time. For those questions that are maybe a little bit more generic, like what is product management? How do I become a product manager? Anything else a little bit off topic? We will still get to those questions, but we'll wait until the end of the talk to get to those. But with all of that said, let's get going. Let me hand it off to Nis to take it away on today's talk: how to tell your product management story and build your personal brand.
Thanks, Jeremy, and thanks again for the opportunity. I think this is my 5th talk now with the Product Mentor. So let me get going here. So yeah, as Jeremy said, we're going to talk about a little bit about building your personal brand. So a bit more of an offbeat topic than I think what we normally go through in these talks, which is how to actually be better at day-to-day product management, strategic product management, tactical sort of things. This one is a little bit of a different topic. It really doesn't necessarily have to do with product management, other than you're all product managers. Really, it's about building your personal brand and what the value of doing that is. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then I think it'll make sense why I think this topic is so important. So my name's Nis, and I started a company called Alpha. We're actually a platform for business and product teams to generate user insights and make data-driven decisions. As part of that, we've developed a number of really popular resources out there for the product community, some of which you're probably familiar with. So 2 in particular is our podcast, This is Product Management, with 2 million downloads, and then our Medium publication, Product Management Insider, with 5,000 subscribers. So we get to work with a lot of different thought leaders and just practitioners, junior to senior, really help them tell their story across our channels and discover what works and why. We really get like a front row seat to the challenges that individuals, teams, departments, and entire organizations are going through. So what I've learned from working with like hundreds of these people is that they get a lot out of building their personal brands and using our channels to tell their stories, and that there are a lot of benefits to doing that for them. I think particularly in product management, where it's very difficult to tell how you're performing. It's like, I saw this comparison where, with financial traders, like they have a return on their investments, right? It's very quantifiable. In product management, most people can't tell what your product revenue or your net promoter score or whatever you're measuring is. So it's very difficult to ascertain how well you're performing. So telling your story and building a brand is one of the few ways you can really stand out in the space. So I want to talk about some of those benefits that come about from building your personal product management brand. So first is really this ability to influence stakeholders. Again, stakeholders often can't tell how well you're doing, and through this program and through talking to a lot of product people, no matter how good or bad you are at product management, there seems to be a common theme that your stakeholders often get in the way or don't really understand what you do or don't know if you're necessarily doing it well. So speaking at conferences or having articles out there is a really good way to kind of build rapport and get them to realize, hey, like, you know what you're doing, and that this is that you're being effective, and that maybe they'll be more easily influenced through that process. The second is gaining clarity. Basically, writing content or creating videos or doing things like this really helps you get the ideas that are kind of mixed up in your head down on paper and really be able to articulate them clearly. Third is attracting talent, depending on your company. A lot of companies right now are hiring and putting content out there. You can include a call to action to come work with you if people are excited about what you're talking about. So I see that happen a lot. Not just attracting product management talent, but also engineering, design, a few other roles I've seen as well. Another one kind of similar to that is product marketing, which is attracting users to your product by communicating kind of what you're working on, why you're working on, going through that process and building your personal brand. You can also get customers. I'd say that's more common for B2B products than it is for B2C products, but still, nevertheless. Career trajectory as well. It's a really good way to signal to prospective employers that you're doing really good work, that you're thinking through it clearly, that you're a great person to work with. So that's good. And then the last piece here is that you all already know this, because for the mentors in this program, you're giving these talks and you're building your brand and you're raising your profile. And for mentees, you're listening to these talks and you're reading content out there, and you're probably seeing some of the same names over and over, and you're coming to recognize them as sources of great information and people you might want to work with and the like. So I think all these benefits are sort of things that you're probably seeing somewhat regularly as well. So I want to talk in particular, I want to go through some success stories to give you a sense of how this works. And I'm going to use our Medium publication that I mentioned earlier, Product Management Insider, where anyone can submit their story. And we often, we don't know 2/3 of the people that submit their stories, and we meet them over email. It's also a highly collaborative process here. So we work with authors. Sometimes they just submit a completed article, and that's fine. But we also work with authors at times to do work on topic selection, the outline and structure of their articles, titles, copywriting, finding data if they need, design if they want to do like infographics or just a header image. We'll work with them to promote the article. So we really get into the weeds with it, and so that's given us a lot of insight into kind of what works and what doesn't. So I'll focus on 4 key people to demonstrate a few different points here, really demonstrate the benefits that I talked about previously. So the first is Brent Turetsky. A lot of you may be familiar with him. He puts together the New York Product Conference. He was the Executive Vice President of Product at Exo Group, and recently transitioned over to Head of Product at InVision, which is a tool that I assume everyone here is familiar with. It's a interactive prototyping tool. So he wrote a lot of content to help level up his teams at Exo Group, and he would publish them on Product Management Insider, and then obviously other teams at other companies could level up as well. So he had all different sorts of topics around structuring your product organization. So how to interview product managers, how to onboard them, what different levels and career trajectories look like. And then he also had this concept of like user science, which is really how to get qual and quant user insights into decision making. So that was kind of his focus. Holly, very different focus. She was a product owner at Shutterstock and is now a product consultant. She used content really to establish her thought leadership and to announce and feature upcoming workshops that she's doing. So that's more on like the product marketing side, her product being the consulting and the training. Justina Chen, just to illustrate how the ability to build your personal brand, you don't have to be a veteran in product management. You don't have to already have a huge following or already have a very senior title. Justina was still in college when she submitted her article that was really popular, and it was about how she went through applying for product management jobs. She actually ended up getting one at Twitter, but she talked about her interviewing tips, and that was helpful for her peers. So really helped build her profile for influencing stakeholders, but also for her career trajectory. It was kind of all the lessons she learned. So she was someone who had no following previous to writing that first article. And then Jeff Morris Jr. writes some of my favorite content. He is the head of product and revenue at Tinder, so kind of the flip side of that is much more senior. He writes a lot about product strategy, really dispelling this notion that Tinder's rise and prolonged stay at the top of the app store is due to a gimmicky swipe. He actually goes through a lot of the strategy and data that goes into their decisions. So that helps him establish thought leadership, but also he uses the content to recruit talented product people to Tinder, and really go through why they're such an effective product company and why it's a great place to join. I think they're based in LA, so he does a lot of the recruiting for that. So those are just kind of 4 completely different success stories. One is about leveling, like gaining clarity, using content to gain clarity on different ideas and level up your teams at your organization. One is about product marketing and raising the awareness of your services. One is about more influencing stakeholders and career trajectory, and getting your content out there to show that you're doing things effectively. And the last is really about recruiting and getting product people to really respect the way you're building product at your organization. So 4 totally different angles. So what are some of the common themes I've identified in these success stories? I'll go through 3. So the first is that each of these people, and this is a recurring theme again, they become synonymous with a topic. So product management is a really exhaustive discipline with pretty much infinite topics. I mean, it kind of cuts across every aspect of product and really every aspect of the business. So you can fall into a trap about trying to write about too much and going, an inch deep on too many topics. I would recommend picking 1, maybe picking 2, and going really deep on that topic. There's already a lot of surface level content out there, but not much in the way of like truly insightful and expert level content on a specific topic. So the takeaway there is really like own that hashtag, those 1 or 2 hashtags that you want to be synonymous with. The second is really take every opportunity to network and get your name out there. Like most things in life, building a personal brand takes a lot of practice. So just in terms of like meeting people and getting your name out there, but also just in terms of getting better at creating this sort of content and building your personal brand, like you'll make a lot of mistakes early and iterate and learn how to get better at it. So I really recommend not just taking high reward, high exposure sort of opportunities, but take any sort of opportunities. So interestingly, if you dig deep into the profile of any of these product leaders, you'll find that years ago they've been involved in things such as like small meetups, Quora discussions. They had a personal blog that nobody read. Like they did these like little things that helped them learn and build up to some of the bigger things they did. They didn't just start as the keynote speaker at a big conference. So it takes a lot of work to kind of build a following and use low risk opportunities to get better. And last is be a mentor and be mentored and really build self-awareness through that. So don't do any of this building a personal brand sort of in a vacuum. Really expose yourself to other ideas, other perspectives and criticism, and that'll accelerate your learning through this. So I would say like build on other people's ideas rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. You might notice that these themes are not necessarily just for building a personal brand, but are actually pretty similar to building a product, that there are a lot of overlaps in these sort of concepts to building a product. And I've actually written about that before, and I've noted that building content and telling stories is very similar to building products, in which there's often a narrative, but often similar sort of concepts. So 3 of those are that at a high level, it's really about finding problems to solve. So, if you're familiar with like the jobs to be done framework for products, you really have a similar thing in terms of creating a personal brand and creating content. In terms of finding topics to write about, you start with what is the job to be done? What do you think readers are insecure about? So if you think, for example, that everyone is uncomfortable about creating a roadmap, and you're creating content, like solve for that job to be done, solve for that insecurity. So in this case, it's, I felt that a lot of product people really want to tell their product story and want to build that personal brand, but don't really know how to go about doing that. Hence this talk. So the second is really experiment and iterate. And that's something I kind of talked about before. Very similar to how you would build a product. You do experimentation and iteration. It's the same in sort of content. You can publish a blog post and then get feedback and then really update the blog post based on feedback. Similar to you put a product in the App Store, and then you iterate on it that way. So a very similar sort of workflow there, where you ship as often as you can, and then you prune everything later, and get brutally honest feedback throughout the whole process. And the last thing is, even the KPIs can be somewhat similar around engagement. You wouldn't necessarily measure revenue from building your personal brand, but you might measure subscribers, engagement. One of the key performance indicators I often look at is unsolicited positive feedback. So the number of people who email you saying, hey, came across your article or your talk, your whatever it is out there, and I really liked it. And this is specifically what I liked, and I have this follow-up question, right? So that's like a really good KPI, and that's similar to product. You look at unsolicited reviews and feedback as well for a product. So a lot of similarities that I don't think you'll find you'd be out of your comfort zone if you're building products every day. Creating content is very similar in a lot of ways. So I want to go through, now that I went through some of these high level themes, I want to go through more granular things to do and not to do, beginning with things not to do. I think it's really important to build guardrails when you're going about building a personal brand.
Yeah. So before we jump into that, I've got a question from Alberto. So I'm going to go over to him to ask his question.
Sure.
Hey, Nis, thanks for taking the time to answer my question. So one of the things I think that a lot of people hear a lot for any profession, but especially for product people, it's a little bit more difficult, and it's about networking. So everybody says you should do networking, and many people even go through the thing of signing up for meetups, and they do all these things. But I'm not sure that people have an understanding of what am I supposed to do at these networking events often. You know, a lot of times I end up chit-chatting with a couple of people. Like, is that the most efficient way? Do you have any recommendations on like the actual best kind of way to try to, you know, get the most out of networking, so it's not just these never-ending meet and greets that kind of lead to not much?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you've already kind of answered it in the question, is that if you do it totally unstructured, unless you're the one speaking at the meetup and you're the name that people are going for, you're not going to get a lot out of it. You're going to have a lot of like just kind of random meet and greet with people you never follow up from. So I would go with a very specific goal in mind, and it depends what you're doing. So if you're trying to tell your personal story, for example, and trying to build a personal brand, you might go saying, hey, I'm going to identify 3 insecurities that product managers have, and I'm gonna the topic that I know most about from those 3, I'm gonna write about. So you might go and you might meet people and ask everyone, what's the #1 challenge you're facing right now at your job, right? And then you have a really structured reason to go network and to go there. So that might be one thing. If you're looking for a job, you might go and ask what are 3 companies that are hiring, or you might go ask what are 3 people, what are resources or other networking events they go to that I don't know about, and I'm just going to go and ask 3 people those questions. And if you go with that goal in mind, you can't lose, because it's very, you know, you can ask 3 people those questions, right? So I would say go in a structured sense. Once you get better at that, and you've really started kind of building maybe a name or getting some traction in terms of networking, then just going for fun and just to learn and meet people, it's more productive. But just starting off that way, you're not going to get very far, I don't think. Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's all the questions we have right now. Keep them coming in to the YouTube channel, as well as the productmentor.com/live on the bottom of your screen. With that said, let me give it back to Nis to take. Oh, wait, we just had another question just come in. Talk about just cutting it by a wire. Let me hand it over to Andrew for his question. Andrew?
Yeah, I was just inspired by you talking about understanding and going deep on certain topics. So which, do you have favorite channels to find these kind of pressure tests and understand which problems? You know, kind of like medium or alpha, I'm sure, but do you have any other favorites?
Yeah, so I'll go through a couple recommendations I have. But if you will, so this is kind of like somewhat a self-fulfilling prophecy here, but like if you look at the keynote addresses of the major conferences and product conferences, innovation conferences, those speakers don't pick those topics because it's what they want to talk about. They pick those topics because they know it's what people want to learn about. So if you look at those topics and how they've evolved over the years, you'll get a sense of what people are insecure about. So like, for example, 3-4 years ago, they were like, what is product management? How to advocate that your company needs a product management role or function, and, you know, how to communicate what you do every day. Then the next year was like how to implement a strategic product management function and how to collaborate with designers and engineers. Then it was like, it got more evolved through the process. I think now we're up to the point where it's like, it's becoming more contextualized. So now it's like, well, how does B2B product management in a heavily regulated environment work? How does B2C product management at a startup work, right? Because now we're like, it's a much more mature industry, and we're realizing, okay, let's stop writing one size fits all playbooks for everyone and start, making it more contextualized, just like sales and any other function and any other, role is contextualized. You don't teach salespeople the same way if they're going to knock on doors versus send cold emails, right?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Awesome. So as I was saying, it looks like we've got all the questions right now, but do keep them coming in the productmentor.com/live as well as the YouTube channel. And Nis, take it away.
Cool. Yeah. So as I was saying, I was going to go through some of the guardrails, some of the negative principles really of things not to do. This, I would say, is my favorite slide because these are all very counterintuitive, and often the first things I encounter people try to do when they start building their personal brand that is going to send them on the complete wrong path. So I think this is really important. So the first is that you're not Malcolm Gladwell. Now, Malcolm Gladwell is great, and his books are really popular. And he's a multi-time New York Times best-selling author, and he's great. And I would say, even if you could write like him, you should not. First of all, you probably can't write like him, but even if you could, you should not. The mistake people make is in thinking that you have the same captive audience as Malcolm Gladwell. You enjoy reading Malcolm Gladwell because he doesn't get to the point very quickly. He tells stories, he beats around the bush, he introduces nuance and all these things, and it's great because he's a recognized name, and he can afford to do that because you're going to read the first 200 pages whether or not he says anything, right? But they're not going to do that. Your readers are not going to do that if they don't recognize who you are. So you have to learn that you can't beat around the bush, that you really have to get to the point immediately. The first sentence, I know this is such a common theme. People like to really save that punchline for like paragraph 4. Like, no, it's got to be the first sentence. The punchline has to be the first sentence. The key takeaway has to be the first sentence. And if it's not, the drop off is going to be immediate. So it's a really difficult mental block to overcome and habit to break. But basically, the day you learn to forget everything you think about writing well is the day I would say you have a shot at building a really good audience. And then once you build the audience, you can go back to writing like Malcolm Gladwell. But if you see great content out there from really big names in product management, even, don't copy their writing style because they did not start with that writing style. They started with a much simpler writing style. And after they built an audience, they got to that more sophisticated writing style. But really write much more plainly when you start. The key takeaway that addresses the thing you think readers are insecure about, and then how to achieve that key takeaway. Simple as that. The second is you're not Shingy. If you don't know who Shingy is, that's kind of the point here, but he's a self-proclaimed digital prophet at AOL. I'm not really sure what his responsibilities are, but he predicts a bunch of vague stuff and says very little of substance. So I would say basically don't do that. Don't make unsubstantiated claims. Don't come across as very egotistical. It's okay to take risks, of course, and maybe make some predictions based on past evidence or what you see and trends, but don't come across as some of the articles out there, and they don't do particularly well, is just make a bunch of unsubstantiated claims about what Apple or Facebook do and stuff like that. It doesn't really resonate with readers. And the last thing is that you're not a machine. So it's important to get practice at doing this, like I said, but don't come out of the gate having never written an article and saying, I'm going to set a goal of writing 500 words a day, and I'm going to write 1 article a week, and I'm going to read 10 books a month, right? It's super unrealistic, and you have a day job. This is not it. And if you don't set realistic goals, you're going to get burned out really quick, get frustrated, and just ditch it altogether. So keep it simple. Simple articles on a simple cadence. not unsubstantiated claims, not Dickens level writing, just simple articles. Keep it simple. Now I'm going to go through some of the positive principles, some of the things you should do, keeping in mind all the things you shouldn't do. So here are 3 tangible kind of principles to adhere to. So first is find a writing structure that does work for you. If you've listened to my product mentor talks before, you notice that they all literally look the same and follow the same exact structure. That makes it much easier for me to put these together, and I don't have to build them from scratch every time. The structure I have found for articles that works the best is the Harvard Business Review structure, which is literally 90% of the time the same. If you go to HBR, you'll find that 90% of articles follow the exact same structure, which is the key takeaway and reason that takeaway is important as the first sentence, a little story that gets the reader interested in that takeaway, then either some sort of case study or explanation of how to achieve that key takeaway, and then 3 key takeaways, right? So it always follows the same exact structure, and it's really important to find one that works for you. The second is that your personal brand is much more than just the articles, the talks, whatever it is you're giving. It involves things like a personal website, a brand, the graphics you use. Those all really reflect on you and are one of the easiest and cheapest ways you can stand out from other people. So for example, every icon I use in these slide decks comes from iconfinder.com, which is a $19 a month subscription that you can cancel at any time. So basically, you can call it just $19 to download a whole bunch of icons and use them in your slide decks or in your articles and really stand out. Unsplash has free, unsplash.com has free stock photos, and there's a bunch of other stock photo sites where for maybe $50, you can really stand out for 3 months of content. So it doesn't really take that much. And then last but not least, don't expect people to just find your content. You need to be your own champion there. There's so many ways nowadays to promote your content and get eyeballs. It may seem like that there's a lot of noise out there, and that is true. But like I said before, most content out there is written by marketers and vendors and not by practitioners. So if you really go deep on certain topics and don't just stay high level, you can definitely stand out there and you have a major leg up, I would say. So use LinkedIn groups. There's industry specific forums. There's a ton of Slack groups now for product. Send your content to the editors of all the major newsletters, of all the major product newsletters. And in an hour, you could probably increase the chance that your content gets out in front of 5,000 to 10,000 people, like relatively easily, without having a big name in the industry. So those are the positive principles. In case, again, and I've been kind of talking about Medium for most of this talk, in case you thought like you really had to have a weekly column on Wired to get your name out there, we surveyed 155 digital product managers, and these were the channels they use. Medium is far and away the #1. It's free to use. It's free to publish on. You can get your content to publications like Product Management Insider, and I'll talk about that in a second. Mind the Product is also popular, and you can also submit your articles to them, to their blog. Company and PM blogs are the next most popular, and then Product Hunt. So just showing you that these kind of independent channels are absolutely obliterating the mainstream sort of publications that we've been tracking this. We've been asking this exact question for 3 or 4 years. And back when Fast Company, Wired, HBR were some of the most popular resources for product people, it's now completely switched, and it's all independent practitioners have the most popular content out there. So that's really good to know if you're someone trying to build your personal brand, realizing like that's where people are going. They're going to Medium. That's where they're going to learn. So in terms of finding inspiration, I talked about conferences before. Product Manager HQ is a good Slack group, website, course. Of course, the Product Mentor, all these talks are really great as well. Product Management Year in Review, that's pmyearinreview.com. That's we aggregate 40 of the top people in product management, and their top 3 pieces of content that they produced that year. So that's 3 times 40, 120 great pieces of content to take a look at. Our podcast is Product Management. Intercom has a podcast and a blog that's really good. On Medium, the two big product management publications are PM Insider and then Product Coalition. We both take articles from submissions. It's fully contributor articles, so it's 5 to 10 articles a week from contributions from people we don't know, and then go to events. Meetup has a lot of good events. The product group is a great meetup in New York and London. Mind the Product has meetups in virtually every major city. And then Industry is a really good conference in Cleveland and in, I want to say, Ireland. So there's a lot of really great opportunities to get inspiration, to publish your content, and to network and meet other people. And then the last thing.
Actually, before you get to that, got another question from Alberto. Alberto?
Sure.
Hey, Nis, just a quick follow-up. You gave a little bit of insight there, but you know, as these publications grow, like especially like Medium, it's become a little bit hard to really kind of curate content there. Do you have any favorite ways that you try to do outside of just following a couple of the ones that you mentioned? Like, any strategies on that?
Yeah, I would say definitely the publications are the way that people curate the content, because you're right, it's crazy. It's a fire hydrant at this point. So getting into the publications, so I want to be clear, like, we don't accept every article submitted to us. Like, we do a level of curation there. The things we filter out are, one, things that have been said 100 times before. We filter those out. Things that are only surface level, we filter out. Things that are too deep, we filter out. So things that are just like way too sophisticated and should be like workshops at a conference, we filter those out. Things that don't talk about topics that people are trying to solve, we filter those out. So those are the sort of curation that the publications offer. But then also Medium already lets you do a lot. So you can add topics to your blog, like meta topics to the blog, to the article, so that people can find it more easily. Putting high quality images, using infographics. Those are ways, like, we find a lot of people, they scroll through the articles before they read it. They scroll through and they say, all right, is this a wall of text, or is this something like visual with videos and examples? So use references, embed videos. Those sort of things can help your content stand out a lot better than just walls of text. And once you have that in mind and you go look through, you'll learn 75% of the stuff out there you can stand out from, and then you're competing with 1/4 of what you thought you were competing with.
Cool. Awesome. Let me hand it back to you, Nis. Keep the questions coming in. Final call for questions, I'd say. Keep the questions coming in at theproductmentor.com/live and YouTube channel. Here you go, Nis.
Awesome. Yeah, so just wrapping up, this is kind of the advice I've been giving the entire talk here, and how I answered one of the questions before. But like, once you're ready to get started, spend 10 minutes either meeting people, looking around, whatever, writing down 5 things you think product managers are insecure about, and then see if that matches up with reality. Go to a meetup, ask people what their 5, or what their #1 challenge is. See if that aligns. If you think people are insecure about road mapping, they're insecure about working with engineers, they're insecure about writing SQL queries, they're insecure about creating wireframes or prototypes, or talking to their CEO, talking to their boss, getting budget, whatever it is, see if that matches up with reality. And if it does, you might have a winner on your hands. And if that's a topic you can write about, something you've gone through and figured out a really good way to approach, then start creating content on it. It's the same thing as jobs to be done, same thing about building a product. Validate the problem, validate the solution, and then validate your manifestation of the solution. So maybe it's an article, maybe it's a talk, whatever it is, but start with the problem and then work your way toward the solution. And that's really how to build a personal brand in alignment with solutions, and someone who has a name for a specific topic, and then work on promoting it and getting it out there. But don't start with the promotion and with all that stuff if you can't figure out the problem to be solved first. So that's my advice.
Outstanding. So I'd like to thank Nis Frome for today's top discussion of the topic, how to tell your product management story and build your personal brand. It's a really great talk, very honest, and a lot of great details, a lot of steps for people to follow there. And also, as always, the presentation will be posted on our SlideShare channel. And also a big thank you from me Jeremy Horn, aka the Product Guy, and everyone else who joined us today in the Product Mentor. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor, like today's speaker, Nis, the product people of all sorts all around the world, please visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit your very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And with all that said, I'll see you guys all next time. Bye. And for all of you staying, our next talk starts at 11, and it is Alberto is on deck for that. Woohoo! Good job, Nis. And hello, everybody else. So yeah, by the way, everyone else. So we're in the middle time. We're in the middle time there. So this is a good time to get drinks, move your legs, stretch your legs, tell a joke. But also, those of you who are staying with us, do remember to keep your video on. I like to see the heads moving. It gets a little creepy on my side when all the frozen heads are just staring at me like this. So let's see. Alberto, are you good to go?
I am.
All right. You're comfortable with toggling in and out and all that kind of fun stuff?
I believe so.
All right. All right. Do you want to try? You want to test it right now? Right now would be a good time if you want to.
Yeah. Let me test it now.
For the rest of you joining us, this is how the sausage is made. Here, I just saw something. If you could toggle it again. There you go. I see. Ta-da. And then we have a question. And then we see your face again. Maybe. There we go. And it's smiling. Even better. All right. All right.
Try that one more time. Hold on.
Cool. That's it. So everyone can kind of chill, relax, stick in the room. I'm probably going to mute myself for a little bit so that I can get something more to drink. But I'll be back. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Those of you joining the live stream from elsewhere, feel free to post your questions. As soon as I come back, we'll see about getting some questions answered before Alberto's talk that starts at 11 a.m. Eastern about designing and planning to test a new idea, product, and feature. So stick around for that, and I'll be right back very shortly.
I'm jealous of whoever was in LA, by the way. Looked much warmer than here.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, you're in LA too? Somebody else was in LA.
I was. I came back yesterday.
Oh. Are you back in San Francisco?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
How's the weather there?
It's not too bad. It's pretty good.
I like somebody's giving us a tour. Anthony's giving us a tour of his apartment. Feeding the cat, maybe.
Do, 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 do. Oh no, people are disappearing. Yeah. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We'll be getting going with Alberto's talk in a little over 5 minutes. If you have any questions, just general for anyone else joining us, or anyone in the room have any kind of product management-y questions before the talk gets going, do feel free to post them to the chat. Telling you, I purchased one domain that happens to be hosted by Network Solutions. And it'll probably be 10 years before I figure out how to transfer it off of there. One domain.
What makes it so difficult?
They do so everyone else, GoDaddy, everyone else, and I'm not advocating GoDaddy by any means. You click, you transfer, and they give you an authorization code instantly, and then I enter it into the other side, and instantly the whole thing starts to migrate. Network Solutions kinda will send you an email in 3 to 5 days with the authorization code, maybe. Which sometimes is timed out the other side, the side that's looking to receive the domain, and then you have to start all over. And then the authorization code expires, and etc. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah. See, that sounds more like my experience with trying to transfer my GoDaddy domain to Squarespace. And I ended up just having to cancel everything and have to wait for the domain to be available again to buy it, because GoDaddy just bungled all of it. It was such a nightmare. It was such
oh my
a
god,
nightmare.
I would never. Oh my god, that's so scary.
Yeah, I mean,
I've been transferring my stuff over to the Google domain stuff. Not that they just are simple. I don't feel like they have an agenda. I don't feel like they're going to try to trap me.
Right.
And so I've been transferring stuff over there gradually. Yeah, no, GoDaddy I haven't had any issues with it. Like, it's usually been a few. Once I understood how it worked, it was click, 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 and then it would send.
I was not there on the first step. That site forever just seemed so unintuitive with all of its different places and things to do, and it was just. I mean, I was lucky that nobody else wanted my name as their domain.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'd be having a heart attack if that was going on. Oh my god! But yeah, no, the GoDaddy is so much better than Network Solutions. Like, I actually had tried to transfer this domain almost a year ago, and I gave up. And now recently I'm like, okay, I have a place I want to try again because I didn't want to transfer. I said I'm not going to try to transfer it to GoDaddy because GoDaddy and Network Solutions were just not working with each other. Yeah, Network Solutions, that's just slime of slime. Like that's just, you want to transfer it, give me the code. The number of emails I've gotten of like, we're so sorry to see you go. Are you sure? Are you sure? Well, now I'm really sure. I just can't wait for this to be over.
Yeah, this is definitely good to know.
Just it's a bad experience. Like it's not a good product they've got. It's a bad experience. And it drives me nuts how much these domain registers charge you anyway, like $10 or $14 or $15 a year. Like that's just silly. Let's see. Oh, we're gonna get going. Alberto, are you ready?
I am.
Yay. All right. Big booming voice from Alberto today. It's going to be fun. All right. Let me just get my stuff all set up. Do my stretch. All right. Everyone, remember to leave your videos on when we get going. Way it works a little bit better. I'm looking at you, Hannah, Ellie. Andrew flicked it before I got to him. Very cool. All right. We're going to get going now, guys. Hopefully I don't mess that up too much. All right, we're good. Here we go. It's Sunday, April 15th, 2018, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors, Alberto Simon, head of product over at Payability. And he's going to be leading a talk today on designing and planning to test a new idea, product, or feature. Let me just briefly explain the format for those of you who might be just joining us right now. The people you see along the bottom of your screen are mentors and mentees from the Product Mentor Program. These are people who get paired up at all different stages in their career with mentors who are experts in the fields of product management to help make better product managers, better products, and better, product decisions along the way. Let me just, if you're joining us, you're either joining us through the productmentor.com/live or the YouTube channel. Just jump in at any time, post your question to the chat window, and I'll get it fed along to our mentor. Let me just quickly go around the room with introductions. I'll tell everyone a little bit more, and then we'll get started. Let's start with Steven.
All right. So hi, everyone. I'm a product manager at Tailwind, and I'm based in New York. And then I'm a mentee for Kyle Wendling, who works at Foursquare.
Excellent. Hannah.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I am a product mentee at a B2B2C company.
Esley.
Hey, I'm Esley Savanas. I am a mentee. My mentor is Andrew, and I work at a company called MBO Partners in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. Ellie?
Hi, I'm from San Francisco, and I work at a company called Franklin Energy.
All right, let's go over to Anthony.
Hey guys, my name is Anthony Lazarus. I am a mentee, and I work at a company called Sit On It, which is an office furniture manufacturer.
Outstanding. Andrew.
I'm Andrew Shu. I'm a product manager here in New York, and I work with a company called Vega Factor, where we help companies build high-performing cultures and better habits. Mentor to Esley.
Great. And Alberto, just a quick intro.
I'm Alberto Simon. I'm based out of New York. I'm a mentor, and I work at a company that advances funds for small businesses named Payability.
Excellent. And I am Jeremy Horn, aka the Product Guy, and I'll be moderating here today. So as you have questions, thoughts, or curiosities you wish to post or share, post them to our live chat on YouTube. Or if you're watching us on the productmentor.com/live, along the bottom of your screen, right below the video, you will find a chat window, a chat screen where you can post any of your questions there. If they are topical, I will jump in as quickly as I can, interrupt Alberto, and make him answer your question. If they're a little bit off topic, a little bit more generic, product management, the questions about life, whatever, I will still pass those along to Alberto to answer for you, but I will wait till the end of the talk for those types of questions. But with all of that said, let's not wait any longer. Let's have Alberto talk to us about designing and planning to test a new idea, product, or feature. Alberto, take it away.
Hey guys, thanks for the time and opportunity. This is my first mentor program participation, and I'm enjoying it. And I'm glad to get to network with a lot of you guys and gals. Yeah, so my talk is about one of the most common things that come up for product managers, whether you're new to product management or a senior leader in product, which is, kind of how do you take the best approach to building out the first version of something? How do you take an idea and make it into like the first product version that we can kind of then proceed on? So my focus for my talk is that. And over the last 5 years, I've been working on a variety of startups. Some haven't really worked out, some have worked out. So I've really kind of, tried out a lot of these strategies. And I'm a big proponent of efficiency and trying to get things done in the best way. So that's what my talk's going to be about. And, feel free to jump in with any questions on any examples I provide for my talk. So let's get going. So, as I said, so this is kind of the title of my slide. A little bit about me. So I've been doing product management for over 10 years. The majority of it being in online advertising tech, but I've also worked in finance, health, and have built a couple of social mobile apps. I've had a lot of good luck to have led a lot of products from that idea phase into the actual, selling it part. Most recently, I've worked at Payability for about 4 years, and it's a company that advances payments to help cash flow for small businesses, mostly Amazon sellers. This has become really big in the last few years. We're now at 35 plus employees. We're profitable the last 6 months or so, and we're looking to raise a Series A. In addition, I'm also working on an art investment platform named Masterworks, where you can buy fractional ownership in high-end art. This is something we started a little late last year, and we're looking to launch kind of our first version this year. As I mentioned before, I'm a strong advocate for process that increases efficiency and helps you as a product person add value to the company, no matter what stage, what success level they've had up to that point. And that's what I kind of really enjoy about product. So this is kind of a framework that I share with a lot of people that I talk to in any capacity, but it's kind of been the framework I've used in the last, 10 years maybe in some way or shape to kind of structure the way that I tackle things, right? And it starts kind of at the top where it's, making sure that the product feature is defined well enough for people to be able to sign off. And this is a key component of any product. Implementing the process that makes sense for that product, that team at the right time. The ability to measure progress, obviously, by building it correctly and then being able to see how it's progressing and how it's going along. Delivering ultimately, which is executing, which is probably one of the most important parts as always, but things to keep out there. And the last part, which is more about testing and refining, which is kind of that cycle back into the execution part. Now, I made a slide specifically talking about the assumptions that I'm making prior to any building happening on a product, because I think these are really key. And I think this is actually where a lot of them do not work, do not happen, and then the product doesn't go well. And these are components that as a product manager, you should definitely be involved in. And if you aren't, you should actually probably ask why you weren't involved in these parts. So it includes things like researching the actual product that you're trying to build, finding some way to kind of at least have a hypothesis that is testable and measurable. So later when something is rolled out, you actually have a way to know if it's successful or not. Stakeholders that are in the approval process have given this approval, and this doesn't include just your boss or just like your direct salesperson or something. It has to be kind of a consensus. And of course that you have some ability to have some team assist you in doing that. Now, on this slide, I'll give you some personal examples of my learnings from mistakes that we've made in our product. There was a couple of times where, after getting a lot of feedback for our internal salespeople that they needed a better way to create reports and all these things, also from customer service, we went ahead and built like a self-serve report builder And as it turns out, obviously, that feature is, one, a lot more complicated to build than it might appear, but two, it actually was definitely not the highest value add that we could add, and a variety of stakeholders, including our CEO or our marketing person, definitely asked us like why that feature was built before 15 others that we had that would probably be better. In addition, a lot of the people that said they wanted that feature really never use it, right? So in reality, a lot of times you have to confirm that when somebody asks for something, they truly need it, or they're telling you the real problem that you can then solve with the appropriate feature. So that's a great example of, we spent minimum a couple of months on a feature involving all of our developers and things like that, when in reality it wasn't a relevant feature. It's still to this day, I don't think anybody's using it because it's not really needed. The next part, I think, once you have, let's say you have a good idea that everybody's kind of feels great about, is taking this part where this is kind of the non-fun part of being a product manager, I think, personally speaking, as well as many people that I tell this is a part that they have to do, is, hey, one, you have to actually, prepare a document that every team member can actually understand and sign off on. And I think that's actually more challenging than it seems. It can't be too technical. It can't be not enough technical details on there. It can include, workflows. It can include diagrams. It can include mockups. It just really depends. And in addition, once you have anything of the sort, you also want to kind of take into account, this process of paring it down to have only the most critical features that are needed for version 1. Also accounting for things like, hey, if I want to build Instagram, one of the biggest parts there would be accounting for the architecture needs for that, like how many developers is this going to require, how much upkeep, how much cost on that. That's part of kind of what you have to do as a product person, or at least make sure that you involve the right people to get that outlined correctly. And the hardest part is probably the one that lets you know, like, hey, look, we have at least ran some kind of test or ads or anything like that to let me know that customers actually want the product I'm trying to build. And a good example for payability for us was, we thought that people would want a certain feature where the very next day after their sales on Amazon, they could get that money. And so we actually, in order to test that desired need for that feature, we ran an ad campaign where we essentially said, hey, we have a beta feature coming up soon, sign up now to pre-enroll. In reality, we really hadn't built a feature, but that did give us a good sense of like, oh no, like people really, really want this. And it's become essentially our best feature that we have and the one that generates the most income for us. But it required us to kind of, set ourselves up to find that out before we spent, 3-4 months building it. These are key components here that I've learned in the last 5 years because I've definitely made this mistake, which is a product that, you try to narrow down the features. It still has to be viable, which is a really difficult line, right? So like you can narrow it to like the most simple features, but if it doesn't actually solve anybody's problem because you filtered out too many of the features, that's not really going to be a good product. And you can spend then still, a year or 2 years or whatever funding allows you to spend, and really you kind of never had a viable product to really test and progress on. Getting second opinions also on things like architecture is super important. And a lot of times product people are told we don't have time for that. We just got to get going. We got to get to the development part. But I think it's really critical things to do that. Doing multiple passes at cutting unnecessary features is also one of the difficult things to promote as a product person, especially if you're not maybe the leader in that team. But I think it's really critical because given a couple of days to think about it, a lot of stakeholders actually will not even remember some of the features they had asked for originally. So it's critical that you say as a product person, hey, let's make sure that these are still totally needed before you actually proceed. And the last one I've personally used to good effect is, given enough time, people can come up with new features as well. So therefore, you want to kind of time box the way that you say, hey, we want to solve this problem, and we have X amount of time to actually define this product, so you don't overdo it. The second part, after this, that I've used is this process implementation, right? So I try to stay away from the word process just because lately it's become kind of like a bad word. So people are afraid of the word process when they think of agile and, you know, all these Scrum methods. And it's definitely something that I want to implement, but, you know, I just call it like my way of, you kind of don't have to use the word. So what I do is I kind of have these tools that I traditionally use to, you know, write stories or, you know, estimate things, and whether it's Scrum or Kanban, depending on what kind of thing it is. I think that the key thing there is not necessarily the tools you use, but, you know, how you empower people and have them be accountable, and make sure that everybody adheres to the process that you set. You set regular meetings, you stick to them. You have to be the promoter of this process and make sure that people see you as an example, so they don't feel like, oh, you just put that in place to you know, make sure that they're working, because that's not the process you want. I think these are more like warnings that I've used for myself and our other teams, which is don't let the process kind of become the reason to do the work, right? So a lot of the times the process can be flexible depending on your team makeup, depending on the phase of your product, depending on how much time you have. It should allow you to kind of deliver things on time, but not be the reason that, you know, you spend so much time in meetings. I often hear from product people like, oh, I was stuck in meetings for the whole day. All these things are examples of usually how a process has become the product, or almost as important as the product itself. As I mentioned before, you must be an exemplary of that process. I see too many times that people that want to, you know, say that somebody should do a process, they don't follow it themselves, and then of course the team loses confidence in you. And as a product person, that's probably the last thing you want. I would say also this next one is something I see a lot, and I used to do it myself, which is not be inflexible with the tools you choose. You know, let people chime in. So if they want to use Jira and they don't like Pivotal Tracker, that doesn't really matter. As a product person, you should be able to kind of work with any of these things and make it happen. And then the last one is just, hey, if something doesn't go right, as often happens in any project, don't blame anyone around. Don't like say it was due to the process or anything like that. Like, be sure to, you know, not cause any loss of confidence in the team by use it, or in the process by kind of saying like, oh, we should switch to something completely different. I've seen that happen a lot of times where like, oh no, we should have done this, and the process would have helped fix it, but that's not usually true. The next phase is, you know, how to measure progress as you're actually studying the process of building out a feature and or a product. And so this also includes things like you taking the time to find the right tools to help you collaborate on ideas, clarify requirements, communication, things like that. And also take the time to kind of narrow down those tools that you end up using, just so it can be simple and, you know, have a single point of thing. So for example, many people end up using, you know, too many to-do list type apps, right? So they want to use Asana, and then they use Pivotal, and then they use Google Docs. I think that becomes super unnecessary, and it becomes just more confusing and less likely for you to be able to know what's going on. Number 4 is really important, and has been for me, which is take the time to actually present, you know, sell the tools to the team and explain to them why you think they make sense, and, you know, ask for any suggestions they may have, but take the time to kind of like let them know like there's a reason why I'm using these. You know, some of my favorites I think are pretty common, but you know, Google Docs, Slack, like all these things. Like Pivotal Tracker for me is like a good balance of enough features to track progress and create stories, but not having too much going on, such as sometimes Jira can feel a little bit excessive in what it offers, and it's hard for many different teams to use it. For design, I'm a huge fan of like, you know, iterating on visuals and making sure that people see stuff. So Zeppelin and the Vision have really provided these tools nowadays that that are really key to making sure stakeholders can visualize things. I think a lot of times they don't have the time to read every single doc or every single story that you design. So it's important to give them a way to gauge how the experience is going to be for the user, and let them kind of take it on that.
Yes, I'm going to jump in here. We've got some questions, a bunch of questions, all from Steven. So let me find him there. There you go. Steven, ask your questions.
Hi, Alberto. So you mentioned way back when on like one of the earlier slides on product spec, and you mentioned you should include evidence that customers want this. And I assume that the product spec is the point at which you've sort of defined a problem. You think there is like some sort of set of features that can help it, and now you're getting people to buy in that you should build this. So I wanted to understand, like, how far do you get in this like evidence building portion?
I think that
Alberto, don't forget to exit your slides. We can't see you.
Oh, I can see him.
Alberto?
I think you can. I think I am exited. I don't know if something's froze or.
No, it's good now.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah, so good question on that. So I think for me, that phase includes being able to kind of show the possible reasons that you want to build it out. So it could include, for example, ad results that you did or customer surveys and things like that. So for me, that's where a lot of the work that is done is actually done by the product person. So at that point, before I really involve like developers or maybe a designer could be involved, but I really try to avoid that. So I've really kind of practiced being able to show visuals to the stakeholders as part of my process there, so we can evaluate a bunch of different kind of features that we may want to build. So I really, if at all possible, I try to not involve any development team at that point and kind of just, you know, do it myself, or maybe use a marketing person to help me with some visuals. But really, it's more about sales, you know, marketing, and like whatever ways I find to say, like, here's some clear indications that this feature makes sense to build.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Cool. Cool. Keep the questions coming in to the productmentor.com/live, as well as the YouTube chat section. And as they come in, I will pass them along to Alberto. Alberto, back to you.
All right. All right, cool. So, you know, now that we've kind of touching up on this slide, now that you've kind of decided a little bit about like the tools you're going to use, the different process that you're going to implement depending on what the feature is, I think that the most important part of this is being able to deliver efficiently and, you know, iteratively on the first versions of products. I think seeing the cadence happen, whether it's weekly sprints or whatever you chose, is super encouraging to the entire organization, the entire team members, especially as, you know, nowadays everybody works super hard and long hours to like get things done. But it's really key to kind of show that progress so people can, you know, have those short-term goals as well as that, not lose sight of the bigger goal. And so for me, what's worked really well for version 1s is keeping the iterations really short. So this, of course, doesn't mean that I can't do any real features and I don't do features that are complex, but it does mean that it forces not only me as a product person to better define features, but it does force, you know, the team to kind of really try to evaluate a good way to estimate the feature complexity, and, you know, puts a lot of accountability on the team to deliver. It also allows you to kind of do one of the most common things that happen, which is things kind of change slightly in direction as people find out more. Maybe there's some market research going on at the same time that says maybe we don't want to do certain things. So I think for me, keeping that iteration length small avoids an issue of like, hey, what happened in this month, and then nothing really got going. It also avoids the typical scenario of, you know, if I get given a month to do something, somehow I find a way for it to take a month, which I think a lot of people are naturally, you know, they fall into. And I'm not, you know, it's just kind of like a human trait. The second one I think is really important because I hear too many people have the mentality of like, just ship it, like, oh, I just want to do all these things really fast. I want everything right away. But I think that, you know, as a product manager, to earn kind of that trust from your team, you really kind of want to show them that you've worked to set some realistic deadlines that make sense, because otherwise it just seems like you're one of these people that are like, oh yeah, by being mean to the team or just saying a bunch of unrealistic things, it'll get done a lot faster. So I've worked myself to avoid coming off as kind of out of touch with like how complex software can be, and all the things that come up and all the bugs and stuff that can happen. So I try to set realistic deadlines that are aggressive still, because obviously a lot of this time the team understands that there might be limited time, limited money, limited resources to do things, and we got to get going. But they don't want to make it seem like, oh yeah, let's launch something that's gonna, it normally takes a month, but let's do it in 2 days. Like that's just not, that's kind of a myth that people want to believe can happen. This is the next phase, which is, assuming you get the first version done. I think what helps for my teams has been kind of letting it be known, like, hey, even though the first version feature might be done, it's not like it needs to be truly done, because that's not really possible. So that gives people a little bit of comfort to know, like, okay, the first version had this feature and it works this way, but it's okay. So it's not, if it's missing the 5 other things that could be done on it, it's okay. And having a good plan, and this has helped me in my career, the fact that I had a lot of QA experience, like the team trusts that, hey, this guy knows how to actually test, and he's going to find the bugs, and then we can iteratively fix the issues and make it better. Number 2 is really key as well. So I think we've all had stakeholders or teams of people that give feedback that give you a lot of feedback when something is rolled out. And a lot of the time it's actually based on the fact that it might be new or different than they're used to. So it's super important to kind of take the time to filter out if the feedback itself indicates that you might have actually misunderstood the need, and that's like something bigger to kind of address the next time. Because a lot of the initial feedback will start to kind of fade away if you take the time to do a demo, do a training to the different teams to show them how the new feature, 1, how it's better and how it's improved or different, and 2, how it actually works. So it minimizes their lack of understanding, and then them giving you feedback, trying to revert it back to whatever they're comfortable with. And number 3 goes kind of along with that number 1, which is, you have to kind of be that guy that champions this test, repeat, improve with mentality at your company and on your teams, because this actually, creates a good mindset for how to build features. And one thing I will note, though, that it's harder than it seems, right? Because a lot of the times people say, oh, well, this feature didn't work out, but we learned something from it. But in reality, when I ask them what exactly we learned, it's really hard to quantify. So this kind of this mentality is critical for companies that are trying to maximize the little funding they may have, truly building features in a way that they'll be able to know, like, hey, this resulted in this KPI going up, and being able to see that happen, and then learning from that and taking it forward. And so that's why I mentioned the KPI there as well. But yes. So what are the examples? Sorry, I forgot to mention. One of the examples here is, for us that didn't really work well because of this feature was we were trying to find a better way to qualify our potential clients. So we kind of came up with this feature to automatically qualify them using a slew of, like a checklist type approach. The issue was that checklist was kind of only defined by like a single team member, and that team member obviously is a contributor that didn't have the same high level thinking of saying, like, oh, how do we actually verify that this is repeatable for every customer? So what we ended up doing, was a feature that took, obviously usually a little bit more than people think. And then we started to really kind of see that some of the different client personas were different. So the process needed to be slightly different. And therefore, it was hard to kind of even repeat it for the different customers, which ended up kind of adding scope to the feature itself that ended up taking probably over 3 months. To be honest, even to this day, we're still fixing some of the things there. And so it was a clear example of, we kind of built out a feature because it sounded great on paper for one or two use cases, but we didn't really kind of take it through its paces of really defining if it was repeatable and how it applied to different customers. So that's something that happened to us not too long ago, actually, still. So I'm always trying to improve kind of how we do things there. Yeah, so kind of in conclusion here, this last slide is kind of a reiteration of the things that I think make a good product manager, at least for myself and my experience here and seeing working with others. And I wanted to kind of reiterate these points because they're that critical. So number one being that, again, you're an example of the things that you preach. I think that that's a common thing, but it's difficult to actually do a lot of times. So you want to make sure that you're aware of, if you tell someone that, that you should do a certain process, that you do it yourself. Number two, which I think happens to a lot of us, and sometimes we get caught up too much with those, but you have to be that person that is able to kind of take other tasks that other people may not really know how to do, want to do, and just volunteer and do it. I think that earns you quite a bit of good grace from your team, and they know that you're willing to kind of take on those things that nobody else might be able to do. And even if you don't know how to do them, I think that with all the resources out there, you'll be able to find it, right? So it doesn't really matter what it is. I can usually find out how somebody already did it, like before me. And
we just had another question just come in from Ami Jape, I think, if I'm saying your last name correctly. It's a long one, so just bear with me as I work on reading it and zooming in on the book so I can read it. What are some of the challenges that you have faced in the process of prioritizing and narrowing features when your stakeholders are not sure of the functionality features they need? Can you share an example?
Yeah, sure. So one of the challenges that has happened to me in the last, especially at these startups, is that some of the features start to become for existing clients, and those are hard to quantify versus ones that can create new revenue. So as many of you have worked at startups are kind of like very keenly focused on new revenue generating features. So a lot of times the challenge becomes truly measuring how much improving the existing client experience and or internal experience to deal with the current clients is going to help long term versus just focusing on acquiring new ones. I think that for payability as an example, the best approach that we've taken is that look, at the end of the day, the current clients, a lot of the clients, the new clients we get, talk to the clients that we already have. So even though it may not generate direct revenue by making the current clients happier, we found that by doing like a quick survey of our new clients and understanding if they were referred or if somebody had mentioned to them payability, how did they find out about it? We were able to confirm that for our business at payability, a good review by another person is a really key component for a decision making to join payability and start using it, because one, it costs money, two, it involves money, it involves their payments. So that helped us kind of be able to kind of rank some of those features that are sometimes hard to quantify from a value perspective above the other ones. So that's kind of one of the examples of, it really kind of depends on the business you're running, because to a certain extent, some of that is not as important, right? So if you're running a B2B one, that's not quite as important. I don't really go and ask 6 other clients of some product before I pick it. It tends to be more straightforward of like, offers X features, they work well, I sign up.
Cool. That looks like all the questions we have right now. So definitely a very special thank you to our speaker, Alberto Simon, for today's discussion, designing and planning to test a new idea, product, and feature. Head of product over at Payability. And also, as always, the presentation will be posted to our SlideShare channel. And also, big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and everyone else who joined us today in the Product Mentor. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor, we're always looking for product mentors all around the world. Like today's speaker, Alberto Simon, the product people of all sorts, all types, all levels. Please visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And with all that said, thank you guys, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye. All right. Our next speaker will be joining us at 12 o'clock, at 12 noon. And it's going to be about sprints, finding and maintaining the right cadence for your team and product with Patrick Hoffman. He should be joining us shortly. I will check in with him to make sure he's here. And with that said, those of you who are joining, stick around. People want to stay in the room, stay in the room. Just remember to keep your video on when we come back. I'm going to probably disappear for a little bit to try to eat a little bit of something, maybe, before the next talk. Like I said, those of you who are joining us, sticking around, please feel free to post questions in the chat room. We're happy to answer them as soon as I get back, have other people do it, as well as, hey, if I'm gone, people want to talk about product management, answer other questions, talk about whatever, feel free. But I'll be back in just a little bit. Just need to stretch my legs. That said, see you guys all in just a few. Just stick around.
Thanks for the talk, Alberto.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to answer any other questions via direct contact if you guys had me on LinkedIn or whatever.
Hey, Alberto, I had a question for you.
Yeah, what's up?
For some of the like MVPs that you work on, would you say in terms of development, it's like really short, 3 to 6 months, on kind of like these small enhancements?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, depends. If it's a feature, usually it should be less than that, right? But if it's like a new product itself, over the last 5, 6 years that I've been building on, we try to keep it to like 3 months to get something that you can start using. But as you start to actually use it, you'll realize that, hey, it's missing this, it's missing that. So like realistically, it is like more like 6 months. But all of this time, like even for like Masterworks, which is our latest product, we already started running like ads on Facebook where we have a landing page where we let people sign up via email. Because even though I don't have the product totally built, this does actually educate on what features actually might matter less or more. Especially helps us with a copy, because one of the hardest things for a lot of these software things is like copy, right? So if you go to many of these websites, you barely understand what they offer you. So I like to kind of like immediately get some of those campaigns going on Facebook, and then we send out emails, and then we start to get a better understanding of what part is confusing, what part they don't understand. So yeah, so like probably 3 to 6 months is like a accurate thing that I try to do, and that really kind of gets better as you understand better how to like associate what engineers you might need, right? So or design work and things like that. So
perfect.
Anthony, you work at a company that sells furniture. So wait, how does that work? Like you work on the e-commerce site, or how does that? What are the?
No, it's the physical products. So it's that we sell furniture to B2B. So through dealer networks, and then the dealer networks sell to the end users. It looks like you're sitting in a Herman Miller Aeron chair. Is that right?
I am.
What do you think? Is it comfortable?
I mean, they're really good. You know, it's chairs are one of these things that you can take for granted because you're like, oh, it's a good chair, but it doesn't like make me think I'm in like some luxurious thing. But then I have a bad chair, then you know that you had a good chair before. So it's really one of those products.
Yeah. Same with the bed. I've recently upgraded my bed. You know, you're sleeping in it for 8 hours a day. You're sitting in your chair for 8 hours a day. So
yeah, it's underestimated actually. These things are like one of those things where it actually improves your life in general considerably. It's kind of like working out. You know how when people don't want to, like, it's hard to get going on working out, but then the way you feel throughout, like, the week, the whole, your energy levels, all these things are so like clearly better. But yeah, I was looking at like buying a reading chair, but they're really expensive too. Like all those.
What kind of chair?
Like a reading chair, you know, one of those.
Oh, okay, a lounge, like a lounge type of chair.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wow, some of the ones that are, I think that one, the classic reading chair one, is like what, $10,000 or something?
Oh, the Herman Miller like Eames.
Yeah.
Like, with an ottoman. Yeah, those are really nice.
1,000 knockoffs that are in some way or another not as good, but they're still $1,200. So they're like, you know, it's reviews that have like a weird effect on mentality, right? Because you're like, this thing is $1,200, but there's a bunch of flaws that people are pointing out in the reviews, Amazon reviews, right?
Right.
Like, damn, I'm gonna spend over $1,000 or something that seems to not be that great.
So that's why we're kind of successful, is because we're not that expensive. We're a mid-tier manufacturer, so our price is like 50% less than Herman Miller's.
Yeah.
With the same, with high-end design and
yeah.
good lead times and warranty and all that. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you know, I started to really kind of value some of that stuff too, just like you said, for home as well. How do you guys, I mean, what is it a case where Herman Miller just overcharges not because of the brand, or are you guys able to get that on the cost? Because, you know, some of the stuff is not that.
Yeah, some of our components are off the shelf, whereas theirs are all custom and injection molded. So that's how we can reduce our costs, like the mechanism, like underneath the chair, the cylinder, the base, you know, caster, some of the mesh is all through other suppliers, and we source it in and build it. Whereas Herman Miller like creates everything from scratch, so their cost is a little bit higher, and then they have the premium brand aspect to it. So
yeah, well,
it's a fun space. Yeah, just checked out your guys' website. It actually looks pretty cool.
Which one, the Masterworks one?
Oh no, the Payability, your guys' platform.
Yeah, that's see, like see our website. That's like another product in itself that we've iterated on it so much because, you know, yeah, we get a bunch of feedback like, oh, I didn't understand this, I don't know what this is, and it's kind of an endless.
Yeah, I currently have an Amazon sellers account, and it takes like 3 weeks to get your check.
Yeah, you know, that's actually that's why, you know, to be honest, I was surprised when we found, because we originally were making that product for ad tech people because it was a more clear use case, like, hey, I'm some kind of ad tech little network and I'm providing traffic to some bigger one, and there's a delay in my payment. But when we kind of started doing ads for the product that I was talking about for Amazon sellers, like they quickly jumped on it because you know, as it comes to be, one of the biggest issues for them growing is the cash flow, because a lot of these guys are like 1 or 2 man shops. They're not, you know, they're not able to get go get a loan. They're not able to like do a lot of these things, and they can't really grow, and then they fall out of the buy now thing. And this is like this whole ecosystem that Amazon has provided, but they don't solve all the different issues. So pretty cool space. I mean, we've helped a lot of small businesses there, you know, get a lot bigger. That, and, you know, of course there's a cost, but when you think about the cost of your business not growing, I think that's obviously a higher loss there if you can't do anything.
What was the other product that you had? You said, I think it started with a D, right?
Masterworks.io. Check out that website. We just rolled out a newer version of it's like a landing page for now.
What's the website?
Masterworks.io.
.io. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
It reminds me a lot of the non-accredited investing platforms, similar kinds of concepts where.
Yeah, that's what we're going for, right? So we're trying to allow people that everybody really that has some money and they're thinking about investing, you know, similar people to like using Wealthfront, you know, Stash, all these different apps, and being able to invest in what we feel is a pretty safe and, you know, appreciate, like if you look at the history of art in the last whatever 30 years, it's appreciated really well compared to a lot of other investment products out there. So additionally, obviously, like people can get into art, they like art, but prohibitively it's been expensive for them to participate in any way. So it's become kind of an elitist top end thing. So, you know, the long-term goal for us would be to kind of bring that down to like everyone, so everybody can enjoy it. We'd have like a gallery in New York, in London, or wherever you could see, oh, I'm like 10% owner of this one, like, you know, things like that, like just kind of a lifestyle thing as well.
How do you select the artwork for that? That seems like the trickier part, because the art you really want to invest in, you know, is already $1 zillion, but you don't. I think that's kind of the problem coming into is nobody knows, like, is this Andy Warhol quality, or is this like my little cousin made this quality?
Yeah. So, you know, you're right. So that one of our focuses for the initial, whatever, first 5-6 meetings that we do is that they must be household names, and kind of our strategies to buying them is through auction, because auctions offer you, one, the most proof that it's like a legitimate painting, because a lot of people are going to ask, where'd you get this painting? But two, they also offer the ability to see like, oh, this is the price range. Like they offer you a price range. So if we're able to secure it for something like on the lower end, and then we offer it to people, then they kind of know already like, all right, this is like base price this. And, you know, depending on the total price of it, we'll open it up to more and more investors. So like, it's still possible for you to have 1%, even though the painting might be 5 million. But the first focus definitely is on household names, because obviously, like you said, a lot of people don't know what's what there. We hope to in the future, though, take that into, hey, once people start to learn about, you know, modern art, top people, then you can kind of start to go lower into the verticals themselves of the categories of art. And, you know, we want to also kind of educate people on art in general. So we'll have like kind of like a little notification content center that sends them news about like, look, a comparable Warhol sold for X amount at the London auction. So then it kind of starts to give you a little better sense for how art works and the market and all that. So one of the trends that we're trying to follow and adhere to is that the new age investors, millennials, all these people like to kind of be informed themselves. Like they're not the ones that are like, oh, I'm going to hire some dude, you know, he's my financial advisor, he just takes care of it. They like to be aware of it themselves, right? Like the cryptos have shown that like people want to be in the know, they want to learn themselves. So
it's interesting. You could also almost, after a while, do like a sponsor an artist program. Like if you have an artist where you've bought or sold multiple iterations of their work, it seems like you could also go to them and say, hey, we have this huge user base who would be interested in buying future paintings. And that way you don't even have to wait till they get on the market. You can just go almost directly to the source.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good idea. And definitely something that in our roadmap. Additionally, we wanted to maybe have celebrity type investors, right? So say, hey, look, Cohen, you know, Steve Cohen invested in this one. So like, you know, kind of lends that credibility to let you know like, oh, well, if somebody uses, you know what I mean? Like that derivative investing. There's a lot of cool features I think we can add to this to really grow it. So hopefully, you know, the first few we can show value to people ultimately, and they can embrace it. But it's a really cool product. I'm pretty excited about the future of it.
So are you interested in art, or is like one of the people you're working with
so
like the art person?
Yeah, so Scott, who's the co-founder of this one, is an art collector himself. So he's been like a successful like tech entrepreneur for a while. We met like a long time ago working on ad tech stuff. But I like art myself, but obviously like for the same reasons you just named, I don't have any, you know, Warhol paintings in my living room. But yeah, so we've been wanting to do like some kind of product in art for a while, and it kind of just didn't feel right, like different things that we thought about. So this one's kind of like finally one that we feel like, oh, it seems like the timing could be pretty good for this type of product. So a lot of regulation though. So that's obviously one of the challenges. But
is it regulated like other investments, or I have clearly?
Yes, no, it would be technically considered security investments. Like so, therefore, that's a lot of the work that we're taking care of right now. The good news is that also means that it's harder entry point, right? So like, you're not going to be able to go build this product because it's not going to work that same, you know, like not to you personally, but it's a good barrier to entry to people. Similar to payability, a lot of the benefits we have with payability is that we set it up in a legal way that is pretty hard to copy and without having some money for like legal counsel and things like that, because you get in trouble dealing with anybody's money. So it's,
the compliance around that is
yeah. So that's that's kind of how we see that. Like if we are able to do it right, then it sets us up really nicely to be the leader or one of the leaders in that kind of space.
Yeah, it seems so. You're working more on the non-accredited investor side than.
Yeah, we think that's a bigger market, right? So obviously there's a lot of accredited investors, and we'll definitely do products that might be like, oh, here's one for accredited investors. We might give some kind of discount to them because we want to fill it partially. But our main focus really is, and we think the biggest opportunity is reaching the non-accredited crowd, because that's a much bigger. And also they're also the ones that are more on social media. Like it just kind of aligns better with like the different targets.
It's a very new area too. So a lot of people, I know I've been poking at it for a bit now, just finally being able to start doing more with other startups.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely an interesting area in general. It's been a cool rise for like a lot of these apps too, like Robinhood, all these guys that are kind of reinventing the way that people think about how to invest their money, in things more than just some checking account or savings account that gives you nothing.
Right. The standard 401k or index funds, things like that.
Right. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So we're hoping to do some things with that. But either way, it's been pretty heavy on me learning all these different sections of things, so it's like, oh wow, like so much to learn about everything as always.
Yeah, I mean, at least you come from like a financial services company. I think that gives you a big leg up, because I also work in like a financial services compliance kind of area, and if you don't know it, or every time you think you know it, it's just like another door opens to like a whole another universe, and you just think, oh wait, what?
compliance and that kind of stuff is definitely like that. And one of the challenges too is that it's an old industry. So even if you're like, hey, look, things don't work this way anymore with the internet. They're like, huh? Like regulators still ask you for what website, they don't understand a lot of the stuff. So it's also part of you telling them like, look, this law was written, I don't know when, 1933. So therefore, we are compliant to it, but you don't, it's just like a different way to comply to it.
Hey guys, Patrick, are you good to go?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, you want to practice toggling in and out or anything right now?
Happy to. All good?
Now we are. Okay. Cool beans. All right. Cool. Great. So, by the way, guys, great conversation. Keep it going. Feel free for anyone to chat it up. And for Patrick, we'll get going in about 8 minutes, a little bit less, probably. And for everyone else, we're going to get going with the live stream in a little bit. If you have any other questions, do feel free to post them to the chat. As I'm doing crazy things over here, I will jump back. I'll turn my camera back on, and we'll get some stuff going. In the meantime, I'm going to be running around like a crazy person, stretching my legs and keeping the blood flowing. That said, I'll see you guys on in just a little bit. Everyone stick around, and we'll then join Patrick in his live stream then. All right. Thanks, guys.
Alberto, you mentioned using the ads to kind of validate copy prior to getting live on the site. Can you maybe talk more about that process? Because we did that at one point at Super Pedestrian, both in-house and then kind of outsourcing to agencies. I think it's like really a critical thing that not a lot of startups manage. And I'd love to just hear more about your process.
Yeah. So usually we take this process, right? So we say, hey, we want to do some ads. So when you do ads, you also want to have a secondary part where like you get email information, right? So let's say you get their email. So in our example, we typically use something like outreach. There's a lot of these, right? So what ends up happening is we get people that go to the website, fill out the lead, then we put them in these drip campaigns in outreach, And this way, we kind of take our initial first pass at like what we think is information that they'll want. But we get a lot of feedback from that, right? We get people asking us questions like, what is this? What is that? Like, and then we kind of compile that as a kind of learnings, right? Whether it's FAQ type thing, but then we kind of say, well, hold on now, this kind of really changes a lot of the product design you might have had from a copy perspective, from a flow perspective. So we really try to do that at that point because we still have time, right? We haven't launched it, we still in progress. So that's kind of like traditionally what we've done is like say, hey, look, instead of us trying to guess what the best copy, the best layout of the information is, let's let people actually tell us this. One, it tells us people are interested in any way. Two, it lets us know like, hey, what you thought was clear definitely isn't clear to people that would actually be your potential clients. So we kind of implement this process for every single anything we roll out, because otherwise you have this endless thing of like, oh, let me hire a copywriting person, but that person isn't your client. So like that's the challenge with copywriting. I think that it's more about like if you can find a way to crowdsource from your actual client base, that's actually the best way. So that's why we do that process.
Have you mostly been like operating in one market or also localizing and going global with the businesses you've been doing?
For most of the business has been like I would say like top markets, right? Like not necessarily like China or whatever, but like, you know, obviously like Europe and some other things. For this new one, for the art one, the goal would be to do it for everyone, but you know, we got to play around with that because there is a legality regulation thing and things like that. But to be honest, I actually want more experience with like, you know, localizing for other places, and haven't really had the chance. I think payability is soon. Like we're exploring some ways to like, how do we get something going in China? So how do we do something along, at least at the top places that Amazon still does business and other marketplaces exist?
How do you think you would go about making sure you have that market fit there? You know, as you expand, maybe their needs are different in some capacity.
Yeah, I think that the strategy we've been discussing up to now has actually been to try to find a local partner that can help us kind of be the ears and eyes there. We kind of want to avoid that mistake that a lot of companies do, which is like they think they know it all and they go and they put a team there remotely. But that team, even though it might be there, they don't know the actual business there. So we've been looking at trying to partner with somebody that provides services, for example, for payability, that provides services for sellers of third-party marketplaces. And there's a lot of these, right? So a lot of these services, agencies that help people optimize how they sell, and they know a lot about, you know, the local needs as opposed to us. And then we can kind of start to see like, well, where would our product fit there? Like, could it fit? Maybe it won't, right? It depends on just the way it works there.
Hey, Alberto, when are you guys launching DreamWorks?
Masterworks, we're hoping to launch it. Yeah, we're hoping to launch it in next month. Something.
Oh, next month? Nice.
Something like that. We'll see. We'll see, because it's dependent fully on. We'll launch some version of it next month for sure, but the actual buying the shares part might be a little bit further just because of approval from SEC.
I see. Congrats.
Thanks. I'm excited. Nervous though.
Howdy do. All right. Let's see what we got here. All right, everyone, remember to keep your videos on. There we go. And we'll get going. All good, Patrick? Yes?
Yep, all good.
All right. So just remember, leave yourself muted, you too. And I'll call on you, and you can do all that fun mute toggling. Thank you. Peanut butter was not the right thing to eat right now. Hold on. Oh, all right. Hopefully I don't get too tongue-tied. All right. Here we go, folks. It's Sunday, April 15th, 2018, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors, Patrick Hoffman, Senior Product Manager of Enterprise over at Udacity. He's going to lead a talk today on sprints, finding and maintaining the right cadence for your team and product. And so let me just briefly explain the format. The people you see along the bottom of your screen here are our mentors and mentees within the current session of the Product Mentor Program, where we pair people up all around the world in the area of product management to make better product people, better product decisions, and once in a while, a better product along the way. So everyone wave hi, say hello. Look at that, they're all waving hi, except for those frozen people. Yes, we dipped them in ice. So let me just we'll quickly go around with introductions. And as you introduce yourself, say who you are, where you are, and whether or not you're a mentor or a mentee. And I'll start with the person closest to me, and that is Steven.
Hey everyone, I'm Steven. I'm a product manager at Tailwind in New York, and I'm a mentee to Kyle Wendling, who works at Foursquare.
Excellent. And next up is Patrick. Patrick.
I'm Patrick. I'm a mentor to Anthony, who's down in LA. I'm currently based in San Francisco and other parts of the Silicon Valley and working at Udacity.
Outstanding. And over to, I can't read your name, Nargis, I hope I said your name correctly. Or approximately.
Hi, I'm actually also a product manager, but I'm not a mentor or mentee. I'm Patrick's friend. So I'm here to hear from the community, and I'm interested to always learn more about product management. So thanks for having me.
All right. And do remember to leave your video on. And with that said, I'm going to go over to Hannah. Hannah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a mentee to Jordan. I work out of New York at a company called Vitals. It's a B2B2C.
Excellent. And over to Esley.
Hey, I'm Esley. I'm a product manager at MBO Partners, which helps independent contractors, and I'm in Washington, D.C., and Andrew is my mentor.
Great. And Ellie?
Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm a mentee, and I work at Franklin Energy, working on energy-saving products.
Anthony.
Hey guys, I'm Anthony Lazarus. Like Patrick said, I'm a mentee. I am a product manager at a contract furniture manufacturer called Sit On It Seating, and I'm located in Los Angeles.
Andrew.
I'm Andrew Shue. I'm working out of New York, and I'm at a company called Vega Factor, where we help companies build better habits and higher performing cultures. It's been my pleasure to mentor Esley for this semester.
And Alberto.
Hey, I'm Alberto Simon. I'm based out of New York, and I'm a mentor to Ellie, and work on a few products, but Payability, which is a fintech startup that helps advance payments to small businesses. So.
All right, and a little bit about me. I am Jeremy Horn, aka the Product Guy, and I'll be moderating here today. Post your questions up to the Q&A section at theproductmentor.com/live or to the YouTube area that says live chat. Post your questions up. As long as they're topically related, we'll pass them along to our speaker, Patrick, today. Fairly real time, so you get your answers right away. For those of you maybe asking things a little bit off topic, a little bit more generic, we will still pass them along to Patrick. I just might wait till the end of the talk. But with all of that said, and without any more ado, let me hand it over to Patrick to take it away for his talk on sprints, finding and maintaining the right cadence for your team and product. Take it away, Patrick.
Cool. So I kind of want to talk today about sprints, which are kind of a critical part of Scrum, which if you're working in the technology side, you may have heard about it. Whether you're a PM or working with engineers, designers, Scrum's a large topic that folks tend to hear about, and sprints as well. And so I really want to focus on a couple core areas, what sprints are and how to understand them and across different companies, what Scrum is in terms of it as a tool, what to look out for. And this is actually kind of the key part here in that I'm focusing on cadence, and that the cadence is actually an overlooked multiplier for what you can get out of Scrum and out of this whole process of sprints and teams. And making sure that you have the right cadence at the right time for your product and team, as well as the company, is really a critical thing that in my years I've seen a lot of PMs overlook. And so as a PM, like, your driving goal, besides, bringing a great product to market and making your customers happy and bringing value, there is also, really to have a successful team, because by having a successful team, you'll be able to do all those things. You'll be able to produce work of high value, and, work of high value equals happy customers, paying customers, which means you continue to both have a job and get to go and experiment on new crazy things that you might not be able to otherwise if you didn't have that revenue coming in. And so Scrum's a good way to get teams to deliver high value. Scrum's one of many agile methodologies that are out there. And its focus is really on reliability and repeatability, really all about that machinery. So who am I, and why the heck do you guys even care what I have to say on this? I've been working in technology startups now for about 7 years, a little over 7 years, in some pretty complex areas. Prior to moving out to the West Coast and joining Udacity on the education side, I was working in spaces that go by names like software-enabled hardware. That would have been our robotic wheel over at Super Pedestrian that enabled people to get electric assist just by slapping it into their bicycle. And so that's a highly complex thing. You've got the embedded firmware, you have the actual physical hardware, you have the manufacturing processes, you have things as simple as your e-commerce site and how you make sure to communicate whether or not a product can get to somebody in time. Lots of moving pieces. And so lots of different teams, lots of different Scrum teams, and the teams also not following Scrum who had to be interacting with Scrum teams. And prior to that, over at Social Bicycles, which is now Jump, acquired by Uber, building all of that and really introducing Agile and introducing product management to a team that hadn't really thought of those things, hadn't thought of how to make sure that what you're building is bringing value to a customer and that you can ship things iteratively in order to get that out there. So beyond that, I did tech and product development prior to those roles, and I also continue to do some freelance product management for folks based in the US as well as other areas like China and the Middle East. So lots of different exposure in terms of product types, whether it's the hardware platforms, just simple mobile apps, but also the business models, B2C, B2B, B2B2C. I've done business to government as well. And really products and companies as they go through different stages, the introduction, growth, maturity, as well as decline, which are really relevant in terms of thinking about the right cadence you need for those different phases that your product is in or that your company is in. So what exactly is a sprint and why you should care? So at its simplest, a sprint is the key to the Scrum framework. And it's really just a big bucket, a container for all other Scrum events. Things like your sprint planning, your daily Scrum stand-up, your sprint retrospective, your sprint demos. All of those things are just events that are placed into this bucket of a sprint. And the sprint, the whole idea of it is that it's a chance to inspect and adopt something in your workflow. And the word sprint is really, it's simple, right? It's like, hey, it's this bucket, it's this thing. We're going to do all these events, and it'll make sure that we deliver things of value. And depending on your experience, it can have different meanings to you, and depending on the company, it may mean different things. And so because of that, it's really important when you're a younger PM or when you're a PM joining or parachuting into a new company that's quite kind of up and running, to get a handle on what they actually mean by sprint in their scenario. Are they doing all of it? Are they only doing some pieces? Do they actually do a sprint retrospective, or do they only do retrospectives once a quarter? All of these things are left to the team to determine. And it's important to make sure you understand what you're rolling into, but also what works for you, and pay attention to what's working for you and your team and your company at different stages. And so, the sprints in Scrum are generally considered to be most appropriate for products where you need that workflow inspection, that adaptation. And that's also a point that many people overlook. If you're working on a product that maybe older school, so it came out of software in the 90s, and a lot of waterfall people were trying not to do waterfall. They didn't want to spend thousands of hours building a product, get it to market, and have it just flop because it's completely out. This goes back to points some other people making earlier about, hey, even now we're using sprint methodology and Scrum methodology to validate ad copy and to validate what words we're using on our website prior to it going live, making sure that it actually resonates with our customers and brings the most value to them. So really, it's all about iterative value, incremental work, and across all the different projects and companies I've worked at, it's definitely the norm in software technology companies. It's less common in hardware companies that I've worked at, and it's really rare in a lot of the higher end research type places. So it's great to understand what sprints are and that they fit into Scrum. But really, if you don't fully understand that Scrum piece, you may not be able to bring this value to what you're working on. So Scrum originated in the 90s, came out from a bunch of leading software engineering groups and product people out in parts of the Valley and other areas. And its whole focus was really to help teams and to help the teams become more empowered than they had been, to make sure that the teams were getting value. Because when people are, working a lot of hours and then they ship something and they find out it brings no value, it kind of makes you question what you were working on and why you were spending all that time doing that. And so Scrum was this idea of a way to solve this, and to let you tackle these highly complex problems, which, back in the 90s, software starting to take off, the bubble starts happening, a lot of more complex problems are happening, or you get into server-side architecture of software and really interconnected apps, right? So just like I had with Social Bicycles and Jump, where you have a mobile app and you have server-side and you have kiosks, you have embedded software at the bike, you have the physical experience at the bike of unlocking, locking, communicating, but also the product side of how you integrate with the city and make sure that you've got all the policies lined up, that they're not going to just roll in and rip your bikes off and throw them away. So really lots of complex pieces you have moving, and you want to make sure that at every single point you're able to both bring value and continue to ship something of value. So at its simplest, it's super easy to understand Scrum. It's meant to be a lightweight methodology that you can apply in, but it's also incredibly difficult to master. And in many ways, it's difficult to master because it actually, it's highly deterministic, and it expects you to follow rules and put in place rules that you can kind of implement across your company. And it can be challenging for some companies to want to adapt or to want to pull in this more strict methodology, particularly early stage startups, where they kind of been doing it without realizing they're doing it. They just ship, and they go and they talk to somebody, hey, is this worthwhile? But as you scale, sometimes those processes don't evolve in the same way they want them to. So It's simple. You got that backlog, you go ahead and you create a sprint backlog. That sprint backlog can be, then you go into sprint planning, you figure out, hey, what are these stories? What are the tasks associated to make sure that, my definition of done is actually delivered, that at the end of this period in time, I know that I can say this is done and it's done because of X, Y, Z, and it's going to bring value to the customer in ways A, B, and C. So typically the way I've seen this done, most companies just by default end up at 2-week sprints, and then with 1-day cycles in between that. And potentially into that 2-week sprint, you have something shippable, but many times these days you don't. You have processes that go longer and longer, and you'll have things of incremental value that you can ship, but not necessarily something that you're shipping out to a customer. And this has been both good and bad as I've seen it. It's great because Scrum is formulaic, it's predictable, what's going to be going on. And you kind of, the same way that if you were to go to a movie or a book, there's a really clearly defined story arc, and Scrum has that. In a sprint, there's a clear sense of built-in rhythm, that certain things will happen in certain orders in order to achieve things, and that those regularly occurring sequences just help the team not worry about how to do their work and instead get to actually do the work of value. And the critical thing is that there are other elements that happen outside of the sprint that you have to keep going, whether you want to, have a design team that's running and producing work that engineers can consume and actually make worthwhile, copywriting, et cetera. There's a lot of pieces that can also be done in their own sprint in a separate team. It's worth noting Scrum tends to work best when in teams of 3 to 12, but there's definitely points where one team can't unfortunately be fully independent, which was the goal of Scrum, is that a team could be independent, could do all the work they need to do. And what I've definitely seen in my time as a PM is that very few teams have that luxury. If you're a small team inside a much larger company, you're dependent upon other aspects of that company, and products being released or also changes coming that you don't anticipate and you now have to adapt for and make sure that they don't negatively influence your customers, even though they were positives for the rest of the customer base. And so really the core thing here is that I want folks to take away not thinking of sprints as being only 2 weeks. And this is for a number of reasons. Scrum, if you were to go and get Scrum, go through training for Scrum, they'll talk to you about sprints being anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. The 4 weeks is a relatively arbitrary upper cap just set because they're informed by that principle. They want to ship, and they want to ship early and often. And so if you were to do those, 4 weeks, you'd end up with 12 sprints in a year and only 12 points at which you're getting feedback from your customers in the market of whether you're bringing value. You get down to 2 and you're ending up in that 24 period. And so you could break this wall and go the opposite way. Definitely companies that are more in the hardware and analog space, they will end up having 6-8 weeks in between simply because certain manufacturing processes take long enough that you won't get to see any feedback for that period in time. And you could also go the opposite way, kind of down, and say, we're only ever going to do 1 week sprints. We want to have value coming out every single week. And in general, though, most teams just say, no, we're going to pick this happy medium. We're going to do 2 weeks. It's the right period in time. 1 weeks are too fast. Everything else is too slow. But when I've seen teams working in the 2 weeks, they often get really hung up on the sequential nature of a sprint and the regular routine. And at the worst case, they end up using Scrum and its methods to say no to work, as opposed to figuring out whether they're working on the right items that are going to bring value to their customers. They'll instead, so they may not work as well with PMs or with other teams to make sure that what they're bringing is of value. They'll say, no, this is what we agreed on working on. This is work that wasn't delivered in the last sprint. We have to definitely keep bringing this in. And it makes it really hard at times also to work with other schedules that may not fully align with that 2 week sprint. So if you have a marketing launch coming up that happens to hit on day 2 or day 3, you now have to make sure that all your work was delivered in 1 or 2 prior sprints, which can be great, but it can also be really stressful for certain teams as they get into those types of worlds. and they find themselves just constantly breaking the 2-week sprint that they adopted. They, instead of actually following the 2-week sprint, they start massaging it or adjusting it or even blowing up the sprint a couple of days in and starting fresh. So at its worst case, like I said, you end up with like these 2-week monsters, which just hurt the team across the board and undermine the actual premise of Scrum, which is that there's a high trust environment and self-organizing teams. And the way I often seen 2-week sprints come about is it's actually being mandated more from the top. So whether it's a head of engineering or a head of product, they're like, whichever way it comes about, it's less of that self-organizing nature, and it's really falling back into the, hey, this is how we're going to do it, and we're doing it for this, and just buy into it and make sure you want to do it. And so reasons that they tend to want to do 2-week sprints is you get more frequent demos, which in theory mean more ways to align the solution with the needs of the customer. You get more frequent retrospectives, which on the surface, you know, great. You get more opportunities to recognize what's working, to call out what's not working, and run experiments to improve your performance. But at the worst, you just end up rehashing things over and over and over again, because a 2-week cycle is often not long enough to actually validate that certain things that you're adapting for how the team works will actually be working out, or implement those processes, particularly when it comes to teams that have to work across with other Scrum teams. And so, and they also look for really more frequent progress data points. And that can often be like a chief operating officer wants that in really small startups, or as you get bigger, the head of a business unit. They just want to know that there's a repeatable machine that they can look at and measure and say, are you on track? Are you not on track? And at its best, that's great. You can recognize when you need to actually intervene in a sprint or whether the team is devolving. But in many product scenarios, you're not able to be so deterministic, and it's better to be probabilistic in your approach. And so that's really why the point is that I'm trying to make is that if not 2 weeks, like there are alternatives. And
I've got a question. I want to just jump in here. Alberto, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so one of the challenges that I wanted to ask a question about is implementing this process, right? So I think that this process is often one of the things that people do want to implement. Now, do you have any tips on how to implement that with a team that isn't experienced with it? Because I've seen it kind of go awry and like really disrupt, you know, progress and just in general attitude about what it means. So this often happens where people are like, oh, Scrum's terrible because I tried to implement it and it didn't work out. So any tips on the best ways that you found that, hey, if I need to implement this process, what is some good tips there?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing comes down to understanding what is the product that you're working on, what are the goals you're working on. There are different methodologies. Scrum definitely is one that fits certain scenarios. The first thing is really making sure that folks across the team have that common language and understand what you're going to mean when you say a sprint, when you say a retrospective, when you say a demo. What is the level of work that you expect to see in a demo? And really making sure that people don't, like, if you have a team that's working, that's producing product of value, and you have ways to already get that feedback loop going, you don't necessarily need to like slap in this crazy restrictive process of Scrum. And the worst cases I've seen are when there's like a highly functioning team, they're producing value, and there's other conversations happening by which like they're showing what they're producing. And then some technical PM or somebody else comes in and says, no, you have to sprints kick off on Monday, retros are on Friday. I don't care that you have kids and you guys want to be home at 3 p.m. on Friday. We're doing retros at 3, we're doing demos at 11. You know, that's the worst case I've seen. So really it's making sure that the team understands it's for them, it's to benefit them, and it's to help them advance their work. And this can be easier when it's small teams. It becomes much harder when it's multiple teams across a company. So like when I was at Super Pedestrian, you know, we have an e-commerce team working on what's the whole purchasing experience, buying experience, but they then have to tie into manufacturing to make sure that they're sending orders down to the line right, that when orders are in production, they're getting queued back up. So they're not independent. They have to work with that team at the line. Same way, the guys at the line have to actually work with the hardware team and the embedded software team to make sure that what products they're getting down to the line can actually be built, and that if they identify issues at the line, they can funnel that back in to the engineering process to fix that. And the embedded guys, 2-week sprints, like, God, they hated that idea. And typically they're looking at 4 weeks, 6 weeks, sometimes just really hard technical challenge. They're going to take 8 weeks, and there's no gate point along the way of, are you really on track or you're not on track? It's a tough thing there. So recognizing it's not the right fit for all scenarios is certainly, I think, the first key. And recognizing that you need to first understand what's the team, what's the dynamic they're working on. Like, do they just need more rules to help them deliver, or are they already delivering? What's the product? Is it something as simple as a mobile app, in which case, sure, like, totally, Scrum methodology is a perfect fit for smaller case things. Or are you actually launching a platform, right? If you're dealing with like crazy launches or just different teams, like, it can be harder. I do think the rhythm of it and the cadence part of the conversations, the feedback loops, is really critical for remote teams. So that's something I've done a lot of, is actually standing up remote teams or remote teams for existing companies. And without that ritual of how work flows into the team, it can actually be incredibly hard for a remote team to maintain that synergy of working as a team and producing things of value. So tips-wise, first get a lay of the land, understand if it makes sense, understand what you've done before that worked or didn't work. If you have no idea what Scrum is, definitely go to some of the training classes that they offer or read up on online. You're going to see a lot of different takes with pros and cons, so definitely look at it from both angles. Don't just drink one cup of Kool-Aid and believe that it's the magic holy grail of how to produce things of value.
Cool. Looks like that's all the questions we have at the moment. Keep them coming in to the productmentor.com/live, as well as keep your questions coming into the live chat. And when they come in, we'll get them over to our speaker today. All right, Patrick, take it away.
Sure. So if you don't want to do 2-week sprints, or sorry, if you're challenging this premise, this, like, everyone thinks that 2-week sprints are the de facto. I've been in tons of different companies and everyone's like, yeah, it's 2 weeks. You really need to think of ways to challenge it and why. And so the big thing here is that you're not looking for one solution that is going to work forever at your team. A 2-week sprint may actually be the right thing at different scenarios. A 1-week sprint can be the right way to go about delivering work at other times. And then other combinations or permutations, such as a 3-week sprint, then blended by a 1-week sprint. So the best way to know is really to focus on what you're trying to get done, focus on the stage you're in. So if you're, say, in the idea stage, right, the startup stage of a new product, and you are not ambiguous, you've already done a lot of the market research, you've identified what it is you need to be bringing and building, you've even got your copy written out, you have your system architecture kind of ideated, then 1-week sprints are actually a great thing. Alternatively, if you have a highly ambiguous thing, then the tightness of a 1-week sprint can just be incredibly draining on your team, burn you out. And so the goal is really to pick the cadence that gets you to reliably ship things of high value. And it's important to recognize that you need to figure out when you need to deliver value. In some cases, you don't need to be showing things once a week. That may be too much. Maybe you need to actually bring customers in to interact with the product. And so you can only do that once a month, or maybe once a quarter if you're dealing with some of the higher end enterprise things where you do quarterly reviews with your customers. So it's really all about what is the product you're selling and whether or not it aligns with a certain period in time. What's the stage your company is in? Particularly if you're in decline stage and you're just trying to find ways to cut out costs in your product, then you may not even have a full team anymore. You may have one engineer whose job is just to go in now and again and maintain certain aspects. Or you may actually need to spin up a new team to figure out ways to sunset one product while replacing it with a new product. So that really kind of gets into what's the problem your team's working on, and recognizing that as a PM, ideally you get to see your product through every life cycle, or you can recognize that you're an expert or you get really good skill at parts of those life cycles, whether it's early on or later stages or mid-stage growth, that you recognize what's the right flow for that problem, and really that pace that you need at that time. It's also important to know how long your teams work together. Like if you're just standing up a team from scratch who've never worked together, they can often be more open to certain methods of working, and more routine can actually help them get off the ground, get each other to understand how they're working together, how they're going to make sure that at this specific time each day, they're going to take the 10 or 15 minutes to talk, to identify what their blockers are, in addition to any ongoing conversations they'll have throughout the days they're building. Whether or not your team is independent is incredibly critical, because you may actually need to account for the cadence happening in other teams that you're dependent on for getting work into your team. And so really paying attention to that. And so, your specific experiences will probably differ. And the biggest takeaway is just, it's not one size fits all. The whole point of Scrum is really helping adapt, helping the team identify what works for them within, this rhythm of a sprint. So, things that I have seen work in different places, different times. I've seen, and this one's actually kind of odd, this 3 week and then 1 week and 3 week, in that I have not seen this be a norm. I haven't seen a lot of other PMs that I know implement this or other teams adopt this. But this is one that I've seen work, and I'll talk about why I've seen it work later. And it's definitely, I've seen it work in an independent team. And it really is useful in cases where you need that longer pause to really help validate that what you shipped is bringing value. You can't just do it in one quick demo. Maybe you need to actually do a post-launch period with it, and you don't want that post-launch period to be running into your next sprint. I've also seen the 1 week sprints work, but typically up to 3 months. So like a perfect case in point for this, about 5 years ago back at Social Bicycles, we determined we needed to create a new product, like completely both tied to but independent from our core product, that was direct to consumer. It was a mobile app intended to help gather data in cities around how people were using bicycles, where they wanted better bike infrastructure. And we were using this for a couple different reasons. One, because we thought the apps out there weren't really geared towards what it was to be a commuter cyclist. Two, because we wanted to help cities get data to create better bike infrastructure, which would position us to now understand where bike infrastructure was in a city, how people moved through that city, so that we could actually pitch that city on having bike share and have us serve them with bike share, independent of there being any fixed RFP in a contract. And so, there had been a period of time about 3 months where there was just an idea being bounced around of, hey, maybe we need this. Then a 4 week period of, okay, like really dive in. What's the competition? Does it make sense? What does this actually look like in terms of a story if we were to launch this at a marketing launch in X months? And then like creating that backlog, and a really rigorous, tight backlog, defining things explicitly. And luckily being able to do that in part because we could leverage much of our existing software and just repurpose it for this. And so doing that, we then kicked it off and we said, okay, 1 week sprints. Every sprint, every Friday, we're going to be showing something of value. And the point of that was that we wanted to get to be able to launch something that brought value to customers as fast as possible. And we were targeting 3 months out. We actually managed to get something of initial value out at 2 months. So just 8 weeks, 8 sprints in. And it was in part because we were really getting that quick check every single time, quick checks on design. Does this actually work? Do people understand what this symbology means on the map? Do they understand this flow of how to start a trip? Do they like it? Would they prefer that it was something more like moves, where they just have it in your pocket and it starts your trip for you and measures that you're riding a bicycle? So like definitely in the startup idea stage, when you've gotten past the what is it you want to build and that, and you really want to just fly, tight intervals can be great, can be incredibly powerful for a team. I've also technically seen the 2 week sprints work. actually, let me go back on this one. So the downside to the 1 week sprints is that after that 3-month period, we kept trying to run with the 1 week sprints, but we had burned through the really well-defined backlog. We were now getting into more ambiguous questions about which vein of features should we be pursuing to best bring value? How do we make sure that like this city's concerns are addressed versus cities 1, 2, and 3? And how do we make sure that, city 0 has 2 million people, which is 4x what we have in the other 3 cities, but those other 3 cities are willing to pay us. How do we balance out what value is to us, both near term and long term? And so what we found was that the 1 week sprints actually started burning out other parts of our machinery. If you think of the company and what we're doing as a manufacturing line, PMs weren't able to keep up with the definition of the product and the definition of what was going to be of value to the customer. Design wasn't able to actually keep designs flowing in for the engineers to work on. And so we basically blew that up and shifted Cadence to a different pace. And we actually switched over to a 2-week cycle. And again, we only ran that one for a certain length of time, but we ran it in a length of time where we recognized that, it's okay now that we're not doing it every single week. 2 weeks feels right, 2 times a month. What we often did in that case actually is we had multiple customers that we'd be speaking to. And so for the customer, their cadence actually was once a month. But for the team, they'd be presenting to customers and presenting out the work every 2 weeks. And we thought that could continue on for a really long time, but what we found was that it actually resulted in some stagnant work where the engineers just got into a routine of, okay, well, this is what I'm doing and this. And it ended up at, I think basically we re-entered a stage when we should have been going back to 1 week sprints where we needed a tighter interval of feedback, but the team wasn't willing to accommodate that because they were now locked into this idea of 2 weeks. And so, the CEO would come in and say, hey, I need to see this on Friday. And they'd be like, well, that's great, but our demo is the following Friday and we're not going to have anything to show you this Friday. And just resulted in a lot of friction and kind of detriment to the team in terms of how the executives now viewed them. They started thinking of them as lazy, not able to deliver, and really caused a lot of problems there. And so 2 weeks can work, but try not to make it the thing you're doing all the time forever.
So we got a question just now in from Andrew. Let me hand it over to Andrew to ask his question.
Yeah, thanks. So I really enjoyed the idea actually of what I saw is you had a 3 week and a 1 week. So you had a 3 week sprint and a 1 week to prep. That's actually surprisingly a bit novel from what I've seen. And now you're on 2 weeks. So what I wanted to ask was, our team struggles with the planning piece and then the execution. So do you plan within the 2 weeks? Like, is it formalized that they spend, let's say, 2 days up front? Or just as you're showing, do you typically customize depending on what the team needs? So if they're having issues planning, you're doing a week of planning and then a 2 week sprint. What's been the most productive way for you kind of help them manage those 2 time horizons?
So kind of both. So to your earlier point of like, is that planning happening inside? At its best case, yes, we've done where planning is actually happening often at the end of one sprint before we flow into the next. And so we anticipate what the work is coming. We've adapted to, instead of just being like, okay, this is the work for 6 weeks out, new work has come in, new work has actually pushed other things down, but that new work is still a little bit ambiguous. The engineers haven't gotten time to go into it. So what we ended up actually doing at one of my last places was starting to implement tasking. And so tasking is where you have a story, you have like acceptance criteria, but then what are the steps you actually have to do to make that happen? And assigning time blocks and value to that so you can understand, okay, actually I need to stand up a server for this. And while, yes, it's only a 1 point story, it's incredibly simple, I need a lot of time actually this time to stand this up. And so really helping them understand that, great, it looks like it's only 20 points, but those 20 points actually have a lot more work in it this time, and whether or not you can really take that in. The 3+1, and I'll talk to also how we did that with interdependent teams. Really that 1 week pause has been useful for when it's kind of like overlapping. So what I didn't get to put in here, or didn't really feel strong enough in putting it in here, is that you can actually have one process flowing into another. And that's what I've seen actually work best. So when you can have the PM who's not, like if you're a really small team, it's challenging because your PM has to be doing the strategy, has to be doing the business, has to be doing the fit, and sometimes marketing, while also really making sure the engineers are delivering and serving that technical role. And that burns a lot of PMs out when they have to balance that, or just results in teams shipping things that when they ship it, people go, wait, that's not what I wrote a spec for. That's not what I expected to be built. And there wasn't a process for the engineers to really help validate that earlier on. And so kind of depends on the team. As you evolve, like, hey, you get to a really huge company, you may end up with a PM who's writing the business spec and the brief, and then another person comes in to really help digest that into engineering terms and figure out with the engineers how you go about building that, making sure that that now comes back. And so that's where I've seen that 3+1 start working more, is that you break up that routine. So basically, whether you do a 1 week and you're just like sprinting really fast and burning out, or a 2 week where it kind of starts feeling like a plod, or 4 weeks, which is great in hardware, but if you're software, you're like, Jesus, can I see something? It breaks it up. Like when you have the same routine happening over and over and over again, it becomes monotonous and you actually end up becoming inefficient in the way you're doing. So you could do 2+1. I haven't tried it yet, but I have had friends in Europe who have done that with some of their shops, where they have like one team that's doing 2, hands off into another week where 1 or 2 engineers pair with some folks on QA, and then any work that comes out of that, like, hey, there's actually not quite implemented right, it can flow back into the 2 weeks, versus they ship it, and then you have to wait for a customer to say, hey guys, you had a major oversight here and there's a huge bug in your software. Personally, I like to do more of an XP model where every single thing we ship is pretty tight, pretty perfect, very tiny, and we can build atop it. Unfortunately, that's not really common, and it's also not something that most engineers know, so it takes a lot longer to stand that up. And so I'm hoping to get there at Udacity, but I only parachuted in 5 months ago, and I'm just happy that we're shipping things of value, versus when I got here and folks were like, what the hell is that? And the engineer's like, this is what you asked for.
Yeah, totally.
So.
Thanks.
Great. And next question comes from Anthony, and Anthony is asking, how much time should a person expect to spend on Scrum Master activities for new teams?
How much time do you have to spend on it? Because unfortunately, it's something that can eat up really all the time you're going to give to it. Both training people, doing the processes you need in advance. Like, okay, simplest thing, say you've got it ironed out and you're looking at maybe a 1 hour session for backlog grooming that you fit in, which is not necessarily part of the sprint process, but is really fruitful because you have a fast growing backlog to make sure that you're grooming it in advance. Maybe another hour to 2 hours for the initial sprint planning, where you have to negotiate what's the right thing to bring in, particularly if you have one team serving multiple business needs, which definitely happens at smaller startups. Your daily Scrum stand-ups can, if you're really good, they can be done in 5 minutes. If you're not, and with newer teams, as folks learn that, you know, not to just ramble and not to make it a social thing, worst case, they can go for 30 minutes, and that just eats up 2.5 hours of time a week, and that's a terrible thing for your team to be doing. Retros, actually, you really want to give some more time. I've seen teams do them in as short as 30 minutes, and those are ones that, you know, are doing a 2-week cycle. Other folks will say, you know, actually it's better, we need longer conversations. We want to do a 90-minute one, but we'll do it every second sprint. And then you get the demos, and demos, you know, happens if you have stuff to ship, to show. And so if you have something to ship every single time, you know, that's potentially an hour. Longer if you end up presenting to executives who derail your meeting and your conversation and end up really down in the weeds and don't know how to like put things in a parking lot to talk about later. And I've definitely seen that as a trend at smaller companies, that the executives are just like, they're already 3-4 months out in their head. And so when they see like these tiny things, they like get way down in the weeds, and it can be incredibly disruptive for the engineering team, because then actually afterwards, the engineers are going to group up and start bitching about the executives instead of figuring out what that was and why. So, you know, at its worst case, you can easily lose a working day a week for all your engineering team. Best case, you're down to a half a day. But the it can be okay provided you get the value out of it, right? So if you were able to run a split test and say, okay, the same exact team runs here without any of this process, and the same exact team runs here with the process, wish you could do it, you really can't, but typically the team with at least some process is going to outperform the team that's just kind of muddying through. But again, it depends on the team. You know, some engineers need very granular briefs to work off of, and other engineers just need to know the spirit of the feature story, and they'll find ways to validate actually as they're doing the work and bringing it back.
All right, that looks like all the questions we have right now. Keep them coming into the productmentor.com/live, as well as post to the live chat on YouTube. With that said, back to you, Patrick.
Sure. So you have that 3+1 that can work for, and this works for interdependent teams. And so the reason why is that shared pause. So whether all of the teams are running on this cycle, or if only some of the teams are running on a shared cycle and the others are running on a slightly tangential one, it doesn't really matter. But this type of process where there's a shared pause to really consolidate. So whether it's give an example. So if you're working on some new embedded code, you know, it may take 3 weeks just to get something out there. But that embedded code is useless without actually interacting at the server side or passing messages over into, say, a mobile app or a client side. And if you just keep running each team independent, you often don't, unless you take an entire sprint to make sure that things are working together, you're going to end up with team A saying that team B built it wrong, or team B saying that team A built it wrong, and just lots of friction in there. Whereas if you engineer in this actual like pause for them to work together, to think of themselves as that larger team for the company, a lot of that friction that gets pushed out instead gets handled and resolved, and the team thinks about this as something. They think about the people who are dependent on them and who they're dependent on as part of their larger team. And so the way I like to think about this is it's actually like, it's not, so there's Scrum of Scrums, which is like a whole alignment for Scrum teams. This has some parallels to it, but works in smaller settings where it's really each Scrum team is an agent in a larger Scrum team. And so that 1 week period is actually time to help align those teams so that during the next 3 weeks, each individual team, as with the individual contributors in a specific Scrum team, they can go off and just deliver. They can go off and focus on what they're doing before that next gated checkpoint. And so like, to the point of like the cadence, right? You want to make sure that you're not just doing a lot of work up front, picking a pace that you think is right or that happens to be working perfectly right now at this time, and not rechecking yourself. Like the whole point of Scrum is that you're consistently going back and validating that what you're doing is working. And that applies to the Scrum method and your cadence as much as to the actual nitty gritty of, hey, is this particular way of building this particular app working? And is this team communicating correctly? And, you know, the retro side, like you're going to cover what's working, but that tends to be inside the team. And it's really important to recognize that the Scrum process itself can actually put your team at risk of not functioning well within the rest of your organization, or can put your team at risk of burning out. And, you know, when you're a smaller startup, or even when you're a large company, you really can't afford to just burn through people. You have so much knowledge built up in them. You've done so much work to train them on processes. They get the value prop of your company that for them to leave simply because of something as stupid as being asked to deliver value every week is just silly. And so it's important and incumbent on you as a product manager who's really responsible for these teams, for both protecting them and guiding them in this capacity, to raise questions with them of whether they're on the right pace at that time. And keep in mind that like it's really, you know, it is a relay race where you're consistently handing off to yourself or to another team to carry on, and that, you know, all out sprints will only burn you out. And so don't do that, as well as, you know, rhythm and regular, you know, too regular, and you actually end up not performing as well as you could be. So that's pretty much it. you guys have any questions, or looks like Jeremy might have frozen.
I had a question. How do you, I guess I'm still trying to wrap my brain around some of the pauses. What are some of the, I know we talked about a little bit of planning during the pause. What are some other activities during the pause? And I guess the follow-up is, you touched on this a little bit, is how do you communicate to stakeholders? What best practices have you seen communicating to stakeholders why to take this pause? Because a lot of what I encounter is engineers are idle. This is costing us a lot of money.
Yeah. You will definitely hear that from folks who may not understand the engineering side. So like case in point, right? Udacity, my team, we do quarterly offsites where the entire team, because my entire team's remote. So we do quarterly offsites where for a week, the entire team comes together. And at its worst case, we don't write any code during that time. And so there's no output visually in terms of, you know, new feature set coming. And people go, what the hell are you doing? And then I have to communicate to them, actually, hey, I'm making sure that we're perfectly aligned as a tight unit right now so that when they fly back out in our remote, there's no questions from them about what's the value proposition we're working towards, what are the key architecture pieces, and best case, we get to actually dive into some hackathons that are actually quite hard to run remotely, and you can do that in person. And so, you know, the last one, we did a hackathon and some engineers put together an entire notification system in one day, something that had been sitting in the back of their mind for a while, and, you know, others hadn't really even been thinking of. Like, it's like an item, yeah, we'll get to it someday type thing. And we're just like, it can't be that hard. Let's just take a crack at it. Now we have a model that we'll run with in the future so that when we do get there, we've already done a lot of the work, the planning, the thinking, how might we do this so that there's value. So engineers being idle, I think, is commonly said, but often misunderstood. I think the work from handing off. So if you're hand off and wait like that, do work, hand off and wait for feedback. That's actually the biggest risk I see in the workflow processes for teams. And so that really involves having somebody who's going to bat to make sure that things aren't waiting, or making sure that knowledge is spread across a team. Because if there's one engineer who's the only one who knows how to do this certain thing, then you're always going to be waiting if you have to put work into that person. And that's a terrible thing to do for your team. So,
hey, so what I miss?
So you missed a question about pauses and basically how do you defend the idea of these things against folks who say, well, now you're not shipping, or now you're not actually producing code and your engineers are being idle. And my engineers are my most expensive asset. Why are you having them be idle?
All right. Sorry about that. The entire internet just cut out on me. I've just been doing this, dancing to try to make the internet come back. Did you guys finish, or am I interrupting right now?
So presentation finished. We were just talking through.
Yeah. It was, all right. Well, let me just do a closing. So I'll tack it. I'll find a way to edit it on and tack it. This is, by the way, for anyone joining, first time ever. So that was fun. So let's see. Oh wait, there's a question. Let's go over this question from Pete Harvey. Pete's asking a question. I have a dev team who has split responsibility between delivering projects for clients, it's often a bespoke product, and developing new features for the product. Any ideas for managing this?
So I think I'd have to first know if the new features are like, so basically if you have a piece of software and you have features that are coming across to everybody and then bespoke things to client A and client B, really first determining which things to build comes down to where's the value. You know, if I have, let's say I've got 30 million annual recurring revenue coming in from my customers, and one customer is half of that is $15 million, and that's the person asking for bespoke things. I'm going to find ways to figure out what are that I can build and should build that still brings value to the other half of my revenue. And I'm also going to figure out if things that I build there, I just have to do, while also saying, okay, what can I do so that I never have to have this company being half of my revenue, and I can be more, you know, mixed so that no one deal is larger than 3 million. And that way I can better